Good morning, everyone. Advising that this meeting will be recorded for placement on Council's website for the purposes of broadening knowledge and participation in Council issues and demonstrating Council's commitment to openness and accountability. All speakers must ensure their comments are relevant to the issue at hand and to refrain from making personal comments or criticisms or mentioning any private information. No other persons are permitted to record this meeting unless specifically authorised by Council to do so. So welcome everyone, councillor, staff and our public gallery for our meeting, our ordinary council meeting today. Our opening prayer, we give thanks for the contribution by our pioneers, early settlers and those who fought in the various wars for the fabric of the Tenterfield community we have today. May the words of our mouths and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord. Amen. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land that we are meeting on today. I would also like to pay respect to the elders past, present and emerging of the Juckabul, Kamilaroi and Bundjalung nations and extend that respect to other Aboriginal people present. We have no apologies today and any disclosures or declarations of interest. Move and second for the apologies. Move Tim, second Kim. Councillor Bonham, Councillor Rhodes. Yes, no one with any disclosures, conflicts of interest, declarations of interest. Thank you. We now move to the previous minutes. Just a second.
Madam Mayor, I'm happy to move the adoption of our minutes from our previous meeting being in attendance. And just to speak to one part of it, please.
No problem. May I have a second, please? Councillor McNish. Certainly. Councillor Pettit.
To do with the amendment which I moved and Councillor and I seconded, Madam Mayor, in your absence, which was well chaired by the Deputy Mayor, and good to see him back in the saddle again after so many years. 136/22 to do with the on page 17, fellow councillors, to do with the amendment that was moved that council seek the written configuration of cross-border discussions, relevant stakeholders subject to the memorandum of understanding with Southern Downs within the next 6 months. Madam Mayor, is very important, and I thought I'd move that in your ROC report because that's where it's at as our board of relations. It is so important. You as our mayor and our spokesperson for our council, I encourage you to work as hard as I know you will, Madam Mayor, to get that in the next 6 months and hopefully it's like herd and cats getting everyone there. I'm just giving you a heads up. But also, Gundawin is our neighbouring council further up down the river, but it is with Southern Downs, and I'd like for us to work as hard as we can to get that reinvigorated and going again because it's so important. And especially being a border town and with all the issues we had with the border closures and all that. So I just wanted to speak on that this morning, that's all.
Thank you. Councillor Peter, I did speak with Vic earlier in the year and Libby is going to set up a meeting in the near future when we're all available. So we also have a GROC meeting coming up soon, another GROC meeting coming up soon.
Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. Any amendments to the minutes? No? So all in favour? Against? Carried. We move to page 20. Item COM 9/22, the review of law, local news and options for social media. If I might have a mover, please.
Happy to, if I can, Madam Mayor, I'll just straight away I'll be speaking against this.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Peter Rosa. And seconded Councillor Ryan. Yep. So our officer's recommendation, welcome Bruce Mills, our economic development officer, to the table.
Keeping, Madam Mayor, just in relation to the confidential item, there's usually a motion to address it in confidential.
And there's no mayoral minute either. So recommendation for items to be considered in confidential section. I have a mover and seconder, please move to confidential. Councillor Murphy, seconded Councillor Sawyer. All in favour? Now we're going to open council reports, page 20. Thank you, Bruce. Proceed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I take the report to council as read. It's fairly straightforward for a 3-month trial of Facebook page. The table in there gives an approximate cost. There's a guesstimate there of 7,000. It won't be 7,000. That would be the highest cost. And at the end of the trial, we would gauge the effectiveness of the page by measuring the number of people who viewed the posts, which is known as the reach, and then shared them, which is known as engagement. And I'll stress it will be a notice board only page. There'll be no discussion, no comments. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you. As Peter, you were speaking against, then we'll have councillor Sawyer.
Just need a correction.
Oh, yes.
It's trial in point 1. Can we change it to a trial?
Could be a trial.
The trial, but let's do the trial first.
Yeah, good idea.
In fairness, Madam Mayor, did you wish to speak for someone who's speaking forward? And I'll
Yes,
have-
it's most unusual for someone to move something that they're actually going to speak against. Councillor
Thank you.
Levy.
Thank
So, we'll go straight to councillor Sawyer. Oh, did you have any comment?
No,
That was just
Just getting us on the right trail to start with.
very good. Speakers for, please. Councillor.
I fully support the proposal.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. And with utmost respect, and I note your comments, and I was happy to move that we deal with the item because that's what's here to do with. And just wanted to flag that I would be speaking against it, and I welcome the opportunity to do so. Madam Mayor, in the report, and thanks Bruce for a detailed report on the. I'm not so much against the Facebook thing. It's just in the world we live in, Madam Mayor. My argument against it is really, do we need it? There's a cost there. And Bruce, you've indicated that that's the estimate to 7,000 for the trial, and 28 grand would be the year. I just wonder with everything else we're doing, especially with local news, has been well received, and everything else that's listed in that column that we do to engage with our community and advertise and do things on our council webpage and the engagement hub and all that. I just feel that it's a cost that we don't need. Totally respect everyone else's opinion, but I just wanted to flag that that's my view.
Thank you. As a bit of background, so councillor Sipon.
This is the one. So I have a question to Madam Mayor. Where will we get this money from?
Thank you, councillor. Look, it's a nominal fee and a nominal budget. It's not an extra budget. What we'll do is slice and dice staff time to accommodate the trial, not trail. Having said that, though, if it goes into the long term, there is a real cost because it means actually staff will have to not do something else to do it. So it's not going to affect the budget this year, but you need to be aware that there is a cost to all these activities, and often that's overlooked.
Thanks, councillor Sipon. I just, as background, I just wanted to provide that Kyogle, should this be approved today, the trial, it would be basically the same as Kyogle Council and a lot of other councils do, where they put up immediately say there's a road condition, something has happened, a road alert or meetings or whatever happens. I might also add that myself and other staff have been somewhat attacked by certain members of the community for putting council notices out on our private Facebook things to make people aware very quickly of something that's happening. And there's no other forum for council to be putting it into social media. Not everyone wakes up every day and goes, oh, I'm going to go into the council website and see what council are up to today. We also had a recent mentoring session by an ex-mayor of Lismore, who said that she thought it was very important that every council has its Facebook page for all of the above reasons, and particularly with regard to timeliness of getting that information out. And during our community consultations, it came up repeatedly for people, interestingly, in our rural areas as well, to say that where they do have access, they do look on Facebook and share information amongst each other. So they were also asking for it, and we do see a lot of people in our local area where you do have communication who use Facebook regularly. Councillor Peter Murphy, then Councillor Knight.
Of the ratepayers who expressed dissatisfaction with the current means of communication, the most common recommendation was such a Facebook page.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Jeff.
Thank you, Mayor. If this was approved, I believe that perhaps the whole issues of media should be reviewed for effectiveness of cost, including the bi-monthly, which is a certain cost as well. So I think if it is approved and the budget goes for a 3-month period, we should look at the productivity of all our media ways out would be more appropriate.
Thanks, Councillor Knight. Most recommendation. It also came very clearly through the community consultations that we had that the print newsletter was very important to people, because not everyone does get internet access. The only issue with the print newsletter, as welcomed as it was the timeliness. So, thank you. More comments? Well, I'll put the recommendation. All in favour? Carry. Oh, against? 2. Do you want that recorded? All good?
Yes, I'll
You're
have that
right. So we'll
recorded,
have that
please.
division, thank you. So 4 is Councillor Murphy, Councillor Peters, Councillor McNish, Councillor Nye, Councillor Petrie, Councillor Bonner, Councillor Rhodes, Councillor Sawyer, and against Councillor Secon, Councillor Petty. Thank you very much.
There's first councillor to come, we agree on something. How about that?
How about that? Into the future, you know?
Yeah.
We'll now move to page 25. So items CMM 11/22, Townsville Public Library Branch Services. A mover and a seconder here, please. Moved by Councillor Kim Rhodes, Councillor Murphy, seconder. And is that, do we have Lee? Yes, Lee. Welcome. Our officer Lee May, that's still taking lead. Sorry, and sorry, Lee, just before you start, just read it, that council permanent recommendations, permanent closure of library branches in Torrington, Drake and Irvingville, and the continued closure of Tennant Library on Saturdays. Recall and redistribution of all council assets currently housed at the branches, and the cancellation of any lease agreements in relation to leased area usage for the library branches. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, and thanks for having me here, and welcome. The primary, I guess, reason for putting this report forward is the limitations on staff resourcing currently to service the administration of these services, but also the declining use of the services. The alternatives we could offer as an interim to something, another idea we have is to offer our seeded collection to these same services to either sell or have. So, you know, we're currently deleting 5,000 items from the collection. So this could be also a good alternative to disperse those items that we need to dispose of. But also that's an ongoing process that is a library requirement to annually seed collection items. So that could be a good interim measure with the idea that in the future we would be investigating funding for a mobile library bus, which would provide bigger geographical reach, lots of benefits, i.e. you could offer programs, school visits, mobile Wi-Fi, and also in times of emergencies, resilience sort of services as well. So that's kind of what we're looking at. It's just right now, we're not resourced to service the administration behind those branches in relation to the level of use.
Thank you, Lee. Questions? Councillor Murphy, Councillor McNeish, Councillor Rose, Councillor Bonner, and Councillor Sapon.
The proposed closure of these libraries doesn't mean that the communities won't have a book service. So for instance, in Torrington, they already have established their own book swap service. And what they would like though is that they be able to gain access to the titles which are being deleted from the main library system.
That's a very doable, and it would greatly support our administration of the collection as well.
Thank you. Councillor McNeish.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, can I just move to defer this for another month? That'll give Councillor Bonner and Councillor P time to go to Urbanville and judge what the people up there want, and you and I can go to Drake and do the same. It looks like Torrington sorted itself out, which is great. So I'll just move that, we defer that decision for the next month's meeting.
Thanks, Councillor McNeish. But I'll just ask Lee one question first, is that would it help in the meantime to have a monthly, is it possible to have a monthly even mobile service meantime for those other Drake and Urbanville?
No, it's the collection management and the transport of those items. And so to manage that even monthly in combination with our already owned library service, which is an essential service as part of the state library guidelines, in combination with our interlibrary loans, would require a 0.5 full-time equivalent time commitment from one of our current staff. So it would be difficult to manage even on a monthly basis. It's the collection management administration behind it, as well as the transport to and from those locations.
The issue being, you would understand that our Urbanville and Drake people are very keen on their library service, and that's the feedback we have been getting whilst doing our previous consultations. John, if we might just let your motion just sit for a little minute, we'll just finish the comments and we'll come back to it, if that's okay. So that'll be a foreshadowed amendment. Councillor Kim, then Councillor Green and Councillor Kim.
I would just like to make the point that we're coming into our third year of COVID, and that is probably why there's a declining use of the services. People aren't travelling and aren't going into those facilities. Plus, we don't have staff at most of those libraries. So I think that has to be taken into consideration, and I 100% agree with Councillor McNeish's statement.
Thank you, Councillor Green.
I didn't indicate.
Oh, sorry. So Councillor Bonner, then Councillor Secon, Councillor Peterson.
I just want to go on the record and say that the Urbanville residents definitely are wanting their library services. If indeed the books must be transferred in or out or going to these regional places, I'd just like to get some more time to judge how that's all going to work with our Urbanville residents, especially. And hopefully we can come to an agreement with that. That's I just do not want these Urbanville people forgotten in this matter.
Thanks, Councillor Bonner. Councillor Tom, then Councillor Jiang.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. A lot of these books can be obtained online now, so the library services are sort of downgrading to a certain extent now.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor, and that has been raised, but which once again is only good where you've got communications. Councillor Gianna.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So if I look at the demographics of our shire, I can see that the majority of our residents fall into the 60 to plus range, okay, and that's all on council website. So my thing is, they will not accept digital library because they live out in the middle of book, and that's for all of them. Could we transfer the books to their community halls, the Progress Association, and the equipment like the computers get given to the halls so that people would be able to go online, they organise it themselves, put in their order, and then have that van that we've got covered in Tenterfield, if maybe that could deliver the books.
Should I answer the?
Yes, please.
Yeah, that's okay. I just wasn't sure. So I think down the track, funding, there is infrastructure grants out there to get a mobile library bus, and a lot of the regional libraries are going along that route. So that's definitely something in the future, but we couldn't give a timeline on that because it's obviously funding dependent, and then that would have to be resourced with a staff member as well. As far as what would be manageable right now, like you said, is because I have discussed it with the library staff, is one of the suggestions is to establish a digital access portal at these same locations so that people in those areas can go and access all our online resources. So that includes Comics Plus, which is children's and adults comics online, news and magazine libraries online, Transparent Languages, which has got 100 languages available, and BorrowBox, which is a collection of 4,000 ebooks and 2,000 audiobooks, and then Indie Reads, which is another ebooks and audiobooks portal. And then we've got this Zip Tales, which is a kids education portal. So if we created digital access points that to support those centres, and we could, the best way to service that during this time is to have one of our staff go out and train the committees or whoever are, manage these sites on how to help members assist and access the portal, because every member can access this generally, but if they don't have the technology or the internet, then that's the challenge. The other solution where there's no administration behind is to leave our shelving there and just constantly be supplying through an unregulated time or unscheduled time, but as we seed the collection, there will be continually new books going to those locations, but they're old books from the library collection. So it would mean less administration, but there is for the infrastructure grant that we're currently working through, there's 5,000 items that we've got to deal with somehow. We're doing it through a few book sale locations in the library and the visitor information centre, but we're not going to move them at the rate that we need to be in line with the grant schedule. So that they're the things that we think could be a good solution, and it would also be a good trial for a digital access point to see if we could boost that later at each of the centres or roll that out in more locations.
Oh, sorry, that was I was just wondering if we could give them, if we close the branches and let the community, the Progress Associations run it. That way we're giving them all the books, and then further down the track when we have the resources start, I'm sure most people, there will be one person in each of those progress committees that can use a computer to send an email to Tenterfield saying, look, we'll be sending someone up if there's something. But I think just getting books into them, I've seen the Mingula Community Hall, they have already established a library in there. That was just an option, closing it, so it's saving us some resources and letting them take that control.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Councillor Secor, thank you, Lee. So just for further information, the shelving that's going to be removed in the library, we've had come to an arrangement where all that shelving will be dispersed between the halls. which includes these villages. And so they have that ability to have their own lending libraries. The decision for today is, do we deal with this today, or do we have the foreshadowed motion by councillor McNish, seconded by councillor Kim, to deal with it next month? In meantime, we might be able to work on this, preparing the digital platform, as well as making a decision on, we could do this today as well. Do we make a decision today on whether we stop selling the surplus books and we divide them between these 3 libraries and potentially the halls as well, any excess beyond what these 3 libraries need, branch libraries, as a way forward? Councillor Greg, did you have a question?
Oh, it was unseconded, and I was just going to second it.
Oh, yes, councillor.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just to speak and fully supportive of councillor McNish's amendment to defer this to our next meeting, and and thanks to Lee for your report. So important, Madam Mayor, before I do start, I thank the staff for all the efforts they make in the world we're living in at the moment about cutting costs and doing this and that. So I fully respect that. But this one, I'd like more discussion on it. Either we bring it back to workshop or to the meeting, or whichever way we do it, because sad day when you can't go and take a book out to read, especially with everything our communities have been through. So it's something I thought this council has done well for many years. And even to see the increase, although minimal, at Irvingville over the years in what has been taken out, that's heading in the right way. So fully supportive of Council McNish's amendment.
Thank you very much, Carl. So the amendment would be to defer this recommendation to the August meeting, B, workshop, and like other councillors will liaise with the affected branches and we'll discuss it at the next workshop. And C is to cease sales of excess of surplus books and hold those books for distribution to these 3 libraries and any excess from there to the various halls. Oh, right.
Item B was that consider or provide consideration in the next report of the option to distribute. Correct me if I get this wrong, to distribute the assets, surplus assets to those communities. To support the ongoing because we want the report to go back, we want to consider within that report allocating all those resources to the existing libraries or to all communities.
I think we would need a motion to suspend the ongoing sale for the next month of the surplus books. Because obviously there's clear support to get those books out to these communities and to the halls. Suit you, Councillor McNish?
The reason I want to do this is just to give the communities some say in what's going to happen. As it stands, this going to be thrust upon them. Unless we can ask them in our progress meetings what they want.
And also, in addition, our ward councillor is very happy to take books. We go monthly to these villages. Very happy in the next month when we're working out how to go forward, is that the ward councillors are happy to take books with them for those monthly meetings.
Torrington and Irvingville are currently closed anyway. They haven't been operating pre-COVID or since COVID. The resource centre at Drake, we could get books there if someone's going there. But yeah,
Just perhaps we could get sorry, I have a question about Urbanville. We had an issue there with COVID and vaccination requirements. And so we lost our staff member there. So that library currently is closed as a result of that because we have no local staff person there to run it. But if we go down the model of a mobile library bus, and I know they do work well, my mum gets one up North of Trauma, then that would be the alternate option rather than having a local library person, as well as whatever books happen to be housed in the Memorial Hall, in the local halls that the Progress Association could distribute. Yes.
Can the progress associations actually be charged to work under council's guidance to administer these libraries? Not impossible.
Andre does.
The administration around that and the ongoing support needed would be bigger than what our capacity is to manage.
Madam Mayor, I move the amendment be put.
Thanks, Councillor Square. So move the procedural motion, doesn't require a seconder. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much, Lee. Page 29.
We'll make the amendment to motion.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So the amendment is now the motion. All in favour? Carried. Unanimously. Page 29, item COM 12/22. That council adopts the revised risk management policy attachment 1 and the associated risk appetite statement attachment 2. Welcome to the table, our officer, Wes Hoffman. Thank you, Wes. Oh, sorry, move it, please. Councillor Kim and seconded Councillor Petty.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Mayor, and good morning, councillors. Yep, so the report table is for our risk management policy and associated risk appetite statement. The risk management policy is fairly straightforward and is something the council has had running for about 9 years now. It's a revision and it's to bring in line our policy with the latest ISO standard. Behind that, the attachment is a risk appetite statement of which we haven't had before, and I'll just jump into that in a sec. So our policy is basically our foundational statement of our commitment to risk management for the organisation. The risk appetite statement was discussed with councillors, and I also received some feedback regarding some adjustments in terms of the acceptance of low, modest and moderate risk. Those adjustments were made and have been tabled for today's meeting. The risk appetite statement is fairly important. It gives a baseline for our staff and an understanding of when we are managing our internal risks, that's i.e. all our business unit managers look after risks associated with work health and safety, financial risk, reputational risk, governance risk, etc. This sort of sets a standard of where they know they can work from in terms of those risk treatments that possibly may need to be put in place to mitigate or bring down those risks to an acceptable level. Having a risk appetite statement allows us to set our risk treatments in line with what's possible, what's affordable and what's measurable. The risk appetite statement is something that isn't set in concrete. It's something that obviously needs to be continually reviewed, dependent upon obviously the environment and the situation the council is at the time. Yes, so we're just asking for that to be adopted. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Wes. And if adopted, can we get the appetite statement a bit like so it's blown up here? So
Yep, certainly can.
Thank you. Any questions to Wes? Councillor maybe Councillor Scott afterwards.
I would just like to compliment Wes on is development of such an excellent policy, in particular the risk appetite statement, which really summarizes very well the current situation.
Thanks, councillor Member. Councillor Young.
Yes, I was looking through it and it is hard to read because it is tiny. So these are the modifications that you have brought, is that right?
Sorry, just reframe it, the modifications.
Yes, what we're looking at now in the risk appetite statement is the latest version.
Yeah, that's correct. So this is after, obviously, we tabled it at the workshop. Subsequently, then sent an email out to all councils, and I received a number of responses, and this is after those responses. This also was looked at by the executive team, including myself, and we're comfortable, and I'm happy with where that sits at the moment. Obviously, it's up to council to decide, but this is the modified statement, yes.
So could I just ask my fellow councillors then, we have environment with everything we've been through between bushfires and drought, should we not move that to willingness to accept risk to low? Is that the right question? I just think our environment is very important and we should be looking at the way to keep it in control, clean and safe. So I'm asking, is it possible to have it moved to low instead of moderate?
Obviously, I'll allow that discussion to obviously happen with the council, but my input would be looking at that that risk matrix there that we have zero, low, modest, moderate and high. And I also discussed in the workshop, we have zero there. So really, if we were to look at that, I was nearly going to actually take the zero away because the zero is really unachievable. Zero means that what we need to do to mitigate those risks is basically eliminate any risk whatsoever. That's virtually impossible. So considering that, I would accept normally that low position there is basically the baseline of where we should be starting from, not the zero. But I'm comfortable to have the zero in there. So the modest itself also behind that in terms of bringing that down to a low means we need to take greater importance and a higher level of, I guess, costs associated with mitigating the risks. So behind that, the lower we go down, the more commitment we must make and the more resourcing we must put behind that in terms of decisions, in terms of mitigating the risk factors associated with those items, be it environmental, work health and safety, obviously should always be low. This also, to a certain extent, when I say it sets a baseline, it's also fairly objective sometimes and sometimes subjective to the individual business unit based on what those levels of risk might be associated with the hazards associated with environmental risks, if that makes sense. So it is up to obviously council to decide that. I think as an organisation and where we stand now that I'm comfortable with where that sits. This doesn't mean that we're just going to throw caution to the wind by no means. Obviously, regardless of expenses associated with trying to bring those down, we were always in the back of our mind trying to reduce everything to a low regardless, but there are cost factors associated with doing that.
But does this mean if we don't have it in the low and we don't have the resources and resources will be allocated to a different area, we end up with long grass in some of our parks and council areas, that would be just appetite for another bushfire?
I'll just answer that one. So the difference between low and moderate is low is the council is not willing to accept risk in most circumstances, and moderate is that the council is willing to accept some risk in certain circumstances. So we use bushfires for instance. When normally council does roadworks, they have to do, before they knock down any vegetation, they have to do all sorts of environmental assessments, etc., etc. When it comes to a bushfire, it's go like hell. And there's no prior or pre-assessment, environmental assessment before that vegetation is knocked down to affect a hazard, a backburn, etc. That's the difference between low and accepting some risk in certain circumstances. So that's why environment, I think, has been situated in modest, certainly not in moderate, because we are very much bound by not just ethically, but also legislatively environmental considerations. So, and whether that's to do with the sewer network or whatever it happens to be, but by having it in modest, it then, say in the event of a bushfire or some other extreme emergency, say for instance, we've had trees over the road, and in order to remove those trees to open the roads up, you might affect some other vegetation or something to do with the drainage in that instance, and then it can be remediated later. But whereas if it's unwilling to accept risk, then you hamstring the staff. Councillor Knight.
As this is a working document, I'm very happy, or just like this, I'm very happy to accept the recommendations made by those people who have done it in its current form, and future will handle itself based on review of that process.
I'm happy that we aren't in the zero, because that's often be unachievable, and we certainly don't want to go up into moderate or high. We are in that lower section because that's how this council tries to operate. So, any further questions? Okay, so I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? Do you want that recorded?
Yes, please.
Division. So, for Councillor Peter Murphy, Councillor Tom Peters, Councillor John Cash, Councillor Nye, Councillor Bronwyn.
Madam Mayor, just a point of order, please respect when saying, doing division, I thought the division had to be moved in second. So, sorry, Colin. Yeah, so I'll just comment, so you can just record them, but if you're calling the division, it needs to be moved in second.
Not recorded as a division, or just have your name recorded as not?
I'll just have it recorded. This is Ellen Little second it anyway.
Oh, I'm happy to second it. It's fine.
Gary Berry.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to second if that's.
I wouldn't as chair, but anyway.
No, but I mean, if no one else will, for the purpose of the discussion, Peter.
Well, then,
There
yes.
may well be other, would any other councillor care to second the division for the recording of the names? Councillor John will, thank you.
Yeah.
So, for councillor Fiona, who is against. And councillor Kim up there as well. Councillor Petty. Oh, yeah. Councillor Petty. Thank you very much. Thanks for it. We'll move to page 35, item COM 13/22, the AM White Drive Reserve dedication. This is the road leading to Olivia Hall. Officer's recommendation that council proceed with action to formally dedicate part of lot 2, GC 815097 as a public road reserve along AM White Drive from Newman Highway to Olivia Hall. Mover and a second, please.
We're going to move another meeting.
So Tom beat you, but we can go to the second. So councillor Tom Peters, mover, seconded councillor Peter Petty, and we welcome to the table our engineer Dave Council.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillors, we're presenting a report here regarding AM White Drive down at Olivia. This report just seeks council's approval to proceed with the action to formally dedicate what is part of lot 2 in DP 815097 as a public road reserve. We did, through investigations there late last year, discover through a title search that the road reserve is actually held in title by the Transport Authority Holdings entity. We actually maintain the road now physically. There is a physical road there that we maintain on a regular basis. We also discovered that there were some actions taken in 2008, which is 14 years ago, to inquire about the status and dedication of it. And at that stage, the Rail Infrastructure Corporation did actually indicate to council that they were happy for council to proceed and dedicate the road. So we're looking just to progress that action to tidy up the road. So it actually, the work we actually do, the maintenance we do, is on a physical road reserve, a dedicated road reserve. We won't be doing any construction work though, so there'll be no upgrading costs, no additional costs to maintenance. It's purely going to be the dedication process. We're just trying to tidy that up, and we just seek council's approval to continue.
Thanks, Dave, and it's important that the people of Bolivia know that they have a legal access to that their hall, which can never be removed. Any questions? Councillor Peter?
Through you, Madam Mayor, today, will that road be declared as such right up to the neighbouring property? So that the neighbouring property also has legal access through that road?
Councillor, the area that's proposed is on page 37 of your business paper. There's the area shaded in red hatch. So that basically is the road area leading up to the hall and around the back of the hall to the next property. So it provides access to lot 1, which is also held in freehold by another party.
So they will be assured of legal access along that road?
Yes, that's correct, if we dedicate the road, yeah.
Thank you.
So the purpose of dedicating it is it then becomes a public road and is no longer owned basically by Transport New South Wales.
That's correct, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Councillor Tom?
No,
Thank you. So all in favour? Carried. Thanks, Dave. We'll now move to page 38, item COM 14/22, McLeod's Creek Road. Officer's recommendation that council take no further action in relation to dedication of a formal road reserve along McLeod's Creek Road through the Gerard State Forest. Take no further action in relation to dedication of a formal road reserve on any formation referred to as McLeod's Creek Road beyond the Gerard State Forest where council does not maintain the road. A mover and a seconder, please.
Happy to move, Madam
Peter, the mover, seconder is councillor Brett Sawyer. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This matter relates to obviously McLeod's Creek Road at the end of our maintenance area. We had previously had a recommendation to proceed to acquire a road reserve through the forest, and actually even beyond that, beyond where we maintain. I'm putting the the recommendation to council that we take no further action in that matter. In the second part, we don't maintain the road, so that I don't see the point in council expending funds on a road we don't maintain. In the first part, there's considerable cost to council to go through and actually acquire a road reserve through the forest when it's people can access through there anyhow. And it doesn't actually gain any great benefit to our maintenance anyhow.
Thanks, Dave. As background for you councillors, there was an issue there with a party blocking what had previously been used as a public road, which I personally have always believed is a civil and police matter. It's interesting your costs have come down, Dave. We were told 65,000 at the start, so you must be getting better. Any questions in relation to this matter? All in favour? Carried. Thanks very much, Dave. Now, item GOB 57/22. The council receives and notes the status of the monthly operation report for June 2022. Mover, councillor McNish, seconder.
There's some questions.
Very well. You can start. Yes.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. To do with our monthly reports, mainly around, I could ask lots of questions to do with each department. Well, what I want to commend our staff on at the moment, Madam Mayor, due to the circumstances that we're dealing with the lack of staff. Each and every one of them somewhere in the report is mentioned how they're dealing with their lack of staff, but yet they're still achieving. On my way here today, there's a big crane out at Jackie's Lane, obviously doing something with the ball. Great cement's been poured at the water filtration plant. I see all through our shire, obviously to Fiona and her team, the work that's been done on our roads to repair after wet weather, alter seals and a renewal program. So I just want to note that how good they are and getting on with the job. To Bruce Mills's comments to do with foot and mouth and his comment, I found it interesting, not strange, but interesting. But even with opening of Parliament yesterday, didn't even mention 18 points of order all through our federal government but not to do with foot and mouth, and we all know how devastating that would be to this country. But I commend Bruce and mentioned that. I commend Wes on following up the helipad with more progress there, and hopefully we'll get to the end of that. And to Jody for the great job that she's been doing. And I would ask Madam Mayor to do with that hall somehow, somewhere, can we have a council tour of the hall, just either be workshop day or I don't know, somewhere, just for an update, because I think Joe's been doing a great job, and I see in that report that, you know, dealing with this organisation or that department or waiting for someone else to tick something off, it's not easy, and I fully respect that. But I just want to note that what a great job they're all doing, Madam Mayor.
Thanks, councillor Penny. And now that the builder has finalised the additional work, it would now actually access the toilet area, etc. So, which we haven't been able to up until now. So we can note that for council to, and in doing so, whether we've just had we're having the second pour today at the water treatment plant, whether we will have an update on how that's going at the next workshop as well, which would be very good.
And if I just finish, and I promise I will finish, Madam Mayor, even with the report in here to do with Jody's report again, to do with the building on roof on this building. We didn't make this building, but we deal with the problems that it presents to us every bloody day. So good governance and good government, they deal with those things. That's it's all too hard and walk away and leave for someone else to do later on. So I do commend her again and the staff for trying to fix that problem.
Thanks, Peter. And also, I'd like you mentioned Fiona's team. A lot of people complain about individual things on the roads, but it is worthy to note that Fiona's team had over 2,000 jobs logged in recent months, and that includes going back to do work they'd already done following the February March event, and then got hit again in May. And it takes a lot of time to get around and deal with over 2,000, over 3,000, sorry, jobs on our extensive road and bridge and culvert and central network. So thanks, Peter. More
Thank you,
questions?
Madam.
Councillor Murphy.
I have two questions. Page 71, in relation to the Tenterfield Dam recreational precinct, is it still planned to spend 250,000 on stage one?
Just say page 71.
Page 71.
Page 71.
No. 250,000 is 250,000 was the budget for the previous financial year. I'm wondering, is still planned to spend the best part of 250,000 on stage one?
I believe that's the pontoon, isn't it? That the grant was received for. Correct? Yeah, that was a fisheries grant, and it's a specific pontoon for disabled access to be able to get onto the dam. So it doesn't come down. It's not out of council funds. If that was your query.
Okay, thank you. And another question through you to Chief Executive. In terms of the council reception being open to the public and the costs associated with that, particularly in relation to availability of staff, would it be possible to consider having the front office open, say only 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesdays and Fridays or something like that? Does it really have to be open 5 days a week?
Thank you for your question, councillor. Very good question, and the answer is that that will need to be considered. It certainly is on the table as part of our cost reduction or cost management, and I intend to have further discussion with council about that, particularly in what we call the forward-facing positions, and working out what the best balance is between the cost of delivery of the service and the delivery of the service within allocated timeframes. That makes sense. So the answer is yes, it needs to be part of the discussion and is certainly on the agenda.
Thank you.
I understand that if that was the case, it would have to be widely notified so that people weren't coming to town and found that the building was closed. More questions? Councillor Jeff.
Only two questions through the Mayor. First one is on page 73, theatre and museum stats, and it's more to make the point that the stats set are very welcome with over 300 visitors through page 73. Councillor Peake, very good statistic, and also the with the discovered 9 vouchers at 12K through the cinema and theatre were very excellent stats as well. The second question relates to page 122, 123 and 133 and is relevant to building damage. I just wanted to clarify whether that is additional damage to that we discussed last meeting or not on toilets, etc. It's referenced in page 123 and then page 133.
Yeah, that was the flooding in the untouched area of the.
Also damaged by people.
Oh, sorry, the School of Arts, yes, certainly.
Yeah, so we are continuing to have a problem with that, councillor, and that is, you know, both vandalism of various assets across most of those public assets, including the edge of the School of Arts building itself, of which we've put a temporary cover over. I think we spoke about that before, right the way through, I guess, inappropriate use of our facilities. And I know, for example, the Parks and Gardens staff have been absolutely appalled at some of the findings in our toilets and the amount of time that it takes to actually clean that from people just blatantly misusing the facilities or damaging them.
There's Tentford Police upgraded, if we know, or been asked to upgrade their visitations and inspections at all.
I'll have to refer that to staff.
I was going to say, I couldn't comment directly on exactly those approaches, but we haven't obviously logged those jobs where we have had vandalism, etc. So they have been logged. One, obviously, if there's an opportunity to seek insurance coverage for that, as well as to notify the local police of the problems that we're experiencing. In terms of actually asking for a specific response outside logging those jobs and incidents, I can't answer today.
Thanks, Councillor Jessica. Not only is it, as Kylie has mentioned, appalling what has happened in some of the toilets, particularly Jubilee, and God help us if a visitor walked in and saw that, what they would think of Tenfield. But it has meant that for our local community, those toilets now have to be shut much, much earlier than they ever were before. So there's a loss of amenity for the other local people and families who were using them. And it's just pretty sad that some people have to behave in this manner. Any more questions? Councillor John.
Thanks, Councillor Peake. Back to my usual one on weeds.
Yeah.
I know this black knapweed gets checked every month. I know what they do every month. But my question mainly, my comments mainly pertain to fireweed. It's not mentioned here. One doesn't get one mention at all. To me, it's the greatest threat to this area. I came back from Sydney yesterday on the train, and it's all along the railway reserves, all around the Hunter Valley. It's just ballooning. And so I think the council has to be a bit proactive and start looking at doing our road reserves, at least because it does spread very, very easily. I'd like to see the weeds man do a bit more work on it and be a bit more proactive.
Thanks, Councillor McNish. Going forward with that, Kylie, can we check, because fireweed hasn't been declared as a weed of regional significance for some strange reason, is that what is precluding our weeds officer from dealing with it, or can we have a local direction to deal with it?
Like everything, Madam Mayor, with funding, there's nothing that we can't do at the moment. The ground officer is primarily funded through that project to tackle the weeds in accordance with our regional plan. If council wished to or was in a position to make an allocation to tackle that as a weed, then obviously his focus would shift to that.
Can we ask, give me a clarification if in the course of doing the other work, the existing fireweed can also be collateral damage? Unfortunately, it does require only one poison, Grazon Extra or Grazon Plus, that will kill it.
No, that's incorrect.
What is it then?
We've been doing extensive trials on our property with fireweed and have had probably the most amazing result with the product called Thistral Gold. It has a limited effect with clovers and other non-target species. You'll find that Grazon Extra or its variants have significant impact on non-target varieties.
Thank you. Can we get that information supplied to our weed office.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm sure that Chris is actually across a lot of these things. It comes back to whether or not we've got the funding. We always try and go wide, and that's great. We try and leverage off every opportunity, and I don't want to harp as a long time now ago, but we were successful in getting funding to target weeds that weren't within that plan. And so once again, I guess it just depends as to whether that's added, even say to Fiona's budget to manage those road reserves, or whether or not it's a targeted weed one. But the challenge just comes back to, we have to obviously purchase that and pay to have it done. Where we can, we always try and maximise our input to absolutely anything that we can, but without the funding to target it, obviously, it's difficult.
Could we add that to our local news and also the warning that you're not supposed to touch it with bare hands? Please, just to make landowners, large or small, aware and what products do work without collateral damage, and but with that safety warning, and of course the effect it has on livestock. Councillor.
Madam Mayor, all I was going to say, so therefore, would it only be a matter of risk appetite? So if something becomes a higher priority, so it's not affecting funding, etc., the movement of risk appetite, is that for a certain type of weed? Would that be appropriate or not?
I think the trouble in pushing to get it rated as a higher level weed of significance is sometimes the government agencies think, it's too widespread, it's too big an issue, like bobgrass, and therefore they'd rather not have it on the list and just attack the ones that aren't as widespread, is what I've been witnessing over the years. But we can certainly try to get it listed as a reasonably significant.
The product that Council Bonner's meant, we do sell it in Norco, Madam Mayor. I know that we look after council if they come and buy something.
I don't think that touting for specific businesses is allowed. Thank you, Councillor Petty, and I'm sure all our produce agencies would.
I don't know.
Yeah, Councillor Second and then Councillor Top.
Just one thing, I've heard from a few people around town that their bins were refused for collection because they weren't compliant. There is nothing in the report that said we were going to send someone out. Should there have been some sort of communication?
I believe I first was aware of it myself yesterday, and I did speak with Gillian yesterday afternoon. They had previously done an area of town with an audit and put stickers on bins where people were. This is for the recycle bins.
Yes.
And remember that the recycle bins only cost, I guess, $80 a year for all the collection, compared to over $500 a year for your normal bin. And so they did an audit in one area of town and found a lot of people non-compliant, put notices out, and then subsequently wrote and re-explained what was permissible in those bins. And since then, they've had 100% compliance of those people. So they've done the second part, and that was, and I presume part of the not warning people was so that they didn't suddenly become compliant and then become non-compliant later. The issue, and they found 30 to 40% of people did not meet the correct standard. We pay over $15,000 a month to take our recycled rubbish to Lismore. And if rubbish goes down there with non-recycled materials, that rubbish then goes to the Lismore tip and costs us $2,000. And then we had the asbestos issues, multiple asbestos things, that was costing us $5,000 to be disposed of at the Lismore or wherever they take it off to Ipswich. So it's very expensive to council if people don't do the right thing, and those questions have already been very subsidised. So what they've done, Gillian herself as well as staff went round and did it. Where there were just a few bags in, they pulled them out and still took the load, but where there was excess stuff that they just couldn't, they did not shift it. So people, if they wanted picked up, well, before the next collection, have to clean it out and pay $16.50. If they, or they can advise council and get it picked up as their normal waste. And this will be ongoing through town to really educate people and advise them how important this is. And there will be a follow-up letter sent to everyone with a pamphlet on the correct recycling, but it is unfortunately very costly to council. And when the recycled stuff does go up to the tip, a staff person up there is also trying to pull anything out that's been missed, which of course then is labour intensive and they can only get to certain parts of it. So it ends up costing us a lot of money. That could be used elsewhere. Councillor King. So I guess the thing is that people now that are hearing about it, the other people in town who are yet to be audited, be very, very aware. And there was confusion with like Coles bags and recycled plastic bags where people were putting tins of bottles in them and then putting them in the bin. It has to be all loose. Those soft bags, whether the manufacturer says they're recyclable or not, are not acceptable when they go down. So that's the message if you're talking to anyone. Don't put any soft plastic bags in the book.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I know that we put out our fortnightly newsletter. Is it possible for us to talk to a local radio station and our local newspaper and see if we could actually get a story about recycling and the reasons why? You've explained it very, very well to us all here today, but this information needs to get out into the community and it needs to get out quickly.
Certainly shall, and I'll be doing an interview on Friday with 210 FM, and I'll speak about that. Gillian did say it has already been in the local, your local news, but we'll do a follow-up story, I think, to make people really aware, particularly about these soft plastic bags. Some people had were non-compliant because they had tied up soft plastic bags, but with bottles and tins in there. So the substance was fine. It's just that the if they've got it in a cardboard box, that's fine, but not in those soft plastic bags. So I'll add that to another your local news story. That could be added first Facebook. Thank you. Councillor Tim.
Just got a few pages to mention here. Page 48 refers to the job situation through from Darryl's report. I just want to find out, one, what was the out-of-the-box solutions pertained to at the bottom of that report? Because obviously most of us here feel that the orange shirt brigade need to be supported and more jobs need to be filled on that role. And if there is efficiency to find, I don't think having machines without operators is efficient at all. So I'd just like to know what that out-of-the-box solution may well be.
Yeah, so would I, councillor. And I don't mean that to be trite, but at the end of the day, we do need to explore all options. In the first instance, I'm referring to the discussion we had with Councillor Murphy that we'll have to look at forward-facing positions first, because that's the least disruptive, I guess. But those solutions may be things like a 4-day week and looking away at not losing a service or losing a capability while still being able to afford those services and capabilities. We are in austerity and we will continue to be in austerity for the next few years, as council is aware. And I think as we go along the journey, we will be looking at other benchmark solutions that other councils are using around the world, not just in Australia. And that is some of those out-of-the-box solutions that wouldn't be seen as traditional. But the objective is to try and be as disruptive and affect only the services that what we call soft services first before we go into roads and infrastructure, which obviously has ramifications.
Sure. Now, page 64 on the tourism side of things. I'm very impressed with the increases in website traffic, etc. Seems like we're on the right path there. I just didn't happen to notice anything written about the northern part of the Shire in that slight report. I just want to keep the Northern Border Walk and other potential tourism ventures in the mind of the tourism staff. So that's just I want to make a note there. The Vic, I see they wanted to close various times. If it was only possible to have the details of when visitors actually attended, to close on certain days, I think it needs to be backed up with data as to when people do come, regardless of the penalty rates for Saturday, Sunday. If there's people coming, it needs to be open. And finally, on page 65 regarding foot and mouth disease, we certainly do not want to belittle this comment whatsoever, because it would absolutely devastate not only the entire country, but certainly Tenterfield Shire, if because it's such a high beef cattle proportion in our shire. I'd like to see council formulate a policy when it comes to that. If there's any sort of, if it just so happens to happen in our shire, are we going to have a policy ready, shovel ready to enact if it ever happens?
So from the sale yards as a service, we actually already have plans in place for a multitude of outbreaks. If you're referring more broadly to economic support, stimulus, etc., for agricultural producers, then that's something that probably warrants a further discussion, because we don't have any plans, even lobbying or advocacy for broader biosecurity measures within the Shire as a council.
That's exactly what I'm getting at. I think if council, we can formulate a policy towards it and try and get a system in play to support our beef industry. If such a horrible thing was to enter the country, I think we need to be on the front foot.
So just as further information, our waste depot at Bunbanu had the fencing destroyed in the fire up there, but Gillian has the contractor out there to re-erect the gate, and is putting the temporary fencing up around the cell so that feral pigs cannot get into the waste. So it is a great worry that it's rampant through Indonesia, not just Bali. There are animals walking around all over the place, and people's suitcases and their footwear and their clothing also coming in contact. And over 100,000 people a month just from Bali alone coming there, but we're potentially more likely to get it in meat products, uncooked meat products, and that is why it's so important that, so our tip sites are in the top 10 of the biosecurity risk, which is why the other thing that I have been pushing is, just as background, the foot and mouth that was found in the foodstuffs in Melbourne last week, they were the viral fragments, they weren't live virus, that were found in imported pork sausages from China. And also the beef that some bright tourists decided to bring into Australia that was captured at the border were also not live virus, luckily. So it's a live virus that will transmit it. And what I've been concerned about for years is, ever since actually moving from Queensland to here, is in Queensland there's monthly inspections of all cafes, restaurants and any food hospitality premises to make sure they're not swill feeding to local pig farmers. Because that is where, if you've got salamis, et cetera, that is your highest risk of transmitting foot and mouth. And I have, in all my questions here, which I do regularly, Department of Ag, DPI, local land services do not check for swill feeding. I asked last week when I was in Sydney of the biosecurity people, of the Department of the Minister for Agriculture, etc., and the initial answers I was getting, oh, that's a council issue because they do the safety checks on food premises, and I said no, they do the safety checks for human consumption. Once the human person has finished with the product, that's when it becomes a biosecurity issue and it goes into their area, not councils. They're not going to shift that one onto councils to do this. That's their job as biosecurity. And I also spoke with the Stock Squad man, and he got it up on their Facebook page on Friday about school feeding being illegal. And I think that we as councils really need to ensure that we keep pushing those biosecurity agencies to do their job. And we also need to have that in our local news as well. Do not feed meat products to pigs. Pigs, like chooks, are sentinel animals because they get diseases quicker than anything else. And if we did say get foot and mouth, it's no livestock movements. That means no fuel, because less fuel sales, because the trucks will stop, the cattle will stop, the sheep will stop, the goats will stop. But I see they're stopping access to elephants in Melbourne Zoo, which I'm not quite sure. I didn't know they had clone hooves. But anyhow, it is really, really serious. It's probably the biggest threat to Australian agriculture, more than bushfires, floods, droughts, everything. This one, because it means our exports stop immediately for at least 12 months. So, and you cannot, how do you say you clear of the disease if it gets into feral populations of buffalo, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a huge issue. But at least as council, our waste manager has now taken those steps to ensure that that fencing is up around our site, because that does expose us to a biosecurity risk. But also as councils and as citizens, we need to, when you're talking to people, ensure that then holiday on the Whitsundays, not barley, and don't feed meat to pigs. Councillor Bonner, did you have another one? Or is that?
No, that's it.
So is that all questions? Councillor Tom, last one.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I came back from England years ago and foot and mouth was, an epidemic over there. I came through Darwin. We had to go through foot baths. All our shoes were taken and cleaned and given back to us. And I think the government's been a bit slow on putting out the mats to for travellers coming from Bali to walk on to get rid of the virus if there's any at all. So it's just an observation. Thank you.
Yes, and in fact, the government refused to do so 3 weeks ago. They said it wasn't necessary. Suddenly, when those food fragments and the person was bringing beef in, etc. last week, they moved to do exactly that. And that's the worry, is it'll be, oh, we should have done that. The same as we should for a few months until Indonesia can vaccinate their herds. It's rampant. They've lost control of it until the vaccinations can take place over there, just like COVID. Just stop unnecessary, non-essential travel to Indonesia. And it's as simple as that. So, thank you. So, we will go to 191. So, sorry, all in favour of accepting the report. Henry. 191. Yeah. Would you want to discuss their morning tea or, okay. We can. We're all finance next, so we'll have a quick cover and we will have someone move to.
Happy to move. I'm hungry.
You want a cigarette, councillor?
Excuse me.
Thank you. A seconder, please. Thank you, councillor Jack. All in favour? Thank you. Everyone enjoy your morning tea. And we will start on page 191 on finances.
Happy to, Madam Mayor.
Second by councillor Greg. Thank you. So 191.
Your microphone.
Use my outside voice. Page 191, item GOV 58/22, report on loan balances. The officer's recommendation, the council notes the loan balance as at the 30th of June 2022 was 18,848,630.12. Previously it had been 19 million and $16,129.35 as at the 31st of March 2022. Welcome to Council Officer, Financial Officer, Roy.
Happy to move. We deal with this, Madam Mayor, with some comments.
Your head mover was pretty heavy, 75 weeks. Roy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good morning, councillors, executive. The purpose of this report is to present the council's loan balance as at 30th of June 2022. The balance was 18.8 million compared to the last quarter of 19.016 million. During the quarter, no new loans were taken out during the quarter. Council did refinance a dam wall construction loan to the value of 2.68 million. That was held on the 22nd of June to resolution 132/22. Commonwealth Bank was awarded this offer to refinance, and council got a negotiated rate of 5.73% over a period of 20 years compared to the average interest rates of 6.53. Due to the negotiation process, council saved approximately $105,000 over the life of the loan. Council still has in place the bridging finance loan from the National Australia Bank for a value of $5 million, which we have not drawn down as of yet, and has been kept for emergency or critical usage or a event of a negative unrestricted cash point only. We have not drawn down on that. Any questions in regards to?
Okay, so we do a question straight away from councillor.
Not a question, just some comments, Madam Mayor, if I may. Through you, and I'll include the CEO with this, to do with it on page 192, and Roy, and with you and your department. As a council, I commend you on the job you've been doing there. And all that we're facing, the hardships that we're going through, and the tough decision making that we have made and still have to make in front of us, and including today. The fact that we haven't, Mr. CEO, that we haven't had to draw down on that approved loan back in January, it's good management, and I commend you and Roy and your staff. And the fact that the debt service ratio that's improved since 1st of June, and that's a good thing too. And I know it's not easy, and you're working really hard, but I, as a councillor, I commend you on that. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks, sir.
councillor Murphy.
Roy, in relation to the bridging finance facility, if we did not have that facility, how would that improve our long-term borrowing capacity?
Councillor Murphy, just to confirm, your question is if we did not have that facility?
That's right, so that was zero. Would that improve our long-term borrowing capacity?
No, it won't improve our long-term borrowing capacity. The 5 million at the time that it was initiated by council was due to the fact that council was having a negative unrestricted cash flow. And though we were expecting monies to come from other sources of grants, which state government owed us, we put that as a safety net for our operational purposes only. And the intention of this bridging finance is a short-term intention that if we were to draw down on the full limit of 5 million or 2 million, that we do repay that pretty soon, because even though it's a corporate market loan, the interest rates there at the time were cheaper, but still in excess to an interest rate. If we do draw down on that, it is a liability that we incur and an additional interest expense that we have to pay to the banks.
Understand, but if there wasn't that facility there, when lenders are assessing council's borrowing capacity, that's a liability that's not there. So would that not improve the prospects of us increasing long-term borrowing?
If the facility is not there, then the assessors are obviously not looking at it. So their mechanism will allow council, as per its borrowing capacity, to borrow additional funds. But if we were to have that $5 million borrowed, say today, that adds a liability to us. And if we then went to the bank, any bank, to give us a new loan, and they assess our current liabilities, that 5 million will actually be a hamper to get a loan for a bigger project into the future.
So in other words, the bridging finance facility is not considered a liability in respect to borrowing capacity until it's drawn down upon.
True.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just to confirm for everyone, clarify that bridging thing was purely to take the highs and lows out of us having to spend up front for grant or disaster activities, and then while we were waiting, sometimes for many, many months, the income to come back in from government. Greg, do you have any more questions to to Roy. Thank you. So all in favour? Passed. Thank you, Roy. Page 194, item GOB 59/22. Finance and accounts period ended 30th of June 2020. With the officer's recommendation, the council receive and note the finance and accounts report for the period ended 30th of June 2022. A mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Peter Murphy and seconded, sorry, was that Greg or Kim? Councillor Rhodes. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report is to present a brief snapshot of council's cash and investment portfolio as at the end of 30th of June 2022. The council staff has undertaken a bank reconciliation and investment reconciliation process. And I believe that take it to believe that the report has been read, but just a few highlights on that. Our cash and book balance, our general fund had $30.79 million. Our general trust had $382,000. And $6 million have been invested in our investments. The table that is on page 195 reflects the addition of those three figures with a total cash and investments of $37.17 million, of which the externally restricted cash of $33.635 million. And as at 30th of June 22, our unrestricted funds were at $3.537 million compared to last financial year, where we had a negative $1.22 million. To point out and even mention at the bottom of the table that one of the reasons we do have a higher unrestricted as at end of June is due to the advance payment of 75% of the FACTS grant. Concealed water leakage concession policy. For the month of June 2022, 2 concessions totaling $1,125 were granted under council's concealed water leakage concession policy. In terms of 603 certificates, there were 17 applications for 603 certificates in June. In the calendar year to date, there have been 178 applications compared to 243 applications for the same period last year. Any questions?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Roy, to do with your comments and that it's purely for clarity too, but on page 195, in your bottom column where you've got waste and you've got the 7,255,235. Is that included, is in that figure, is the $3.3 million in that we've approved for the waste?
Yes.
That's part of that figure.
Yes, that loan that we took out a few meetings ago.
Yep.
That once it was drawn down, it goes in there.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Any further questions for Roy? All in favour? Thank you. Page 198. Item GOB 60/22. Recommendation, the council receive and note the capital expenditure report for the period ended 30th of June 2022. A mover and seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Giannis Pons, seconded by Councillor McNish. Thank you, Roy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report is to present the capital expenditure report as at end of 30 June 22. I take that the report and the attachment has been read. Any questions regarding?
No questions? All in favour? So page 201. Item GOB 61/22. Commencement of further community consultation, special rate variation 2023/24 and 2024/25. You can just drop that. Oh, sorry, move a second. A mover and seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Peter Petty, seconded by Councillor Sawyer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report is to recommend that council proceed with commencement of further community consultation and engagement for a Section 508 permanent special rate variation commencing in the 23-24 financial year. to ensure that council maintains and renews assets notwithstanding the constant upward cost pressures and addresses financial sustainability of the Shire. The proposed special rate variation compromises a permanent special rate variation of 43%, which includes the rate peg in the financial year 23-24, and the 43%, including rate peg in the financial year 24-25, representing a cumulative increase of 104.49%. It is important to note that this is a proposal at this stage, and any application following revision from this consultation process may subject to change the 42% that has been proposed. Just a bit of a background as to the reasons for the 43%. During our quarterly budget reviews, the finance staff have presented a true indication that a plan be developed to increase operational income and reduce operational expenditure in consultation with council, and to consider an application for a special rate variation. Council currently financially is unsustainable. Our own source revenue is well below the benchmark. And what it means is the councils across New South Wales and us specifically, we do not generate enough own source revenue. Rates is one of the ways council generates own source revenue to maintain its assets, for which the additional special rate variation is required, the maintenance of assets, renewal of assets, and so on. When council did commence its consultation process in January, February of this year, and in April, when as part of the integrated planning and reporting framework, a number of documents were submitted, and part of that was our long-term financial plan, which reflected a cumulative and a constant loss within our operating statement, underlying a deficit for the future 10 years. And as part of that documentation, we also had presented 2 scenarios to consider for the community as an initial stage of consultation process. And those 2 scenarios were a special rate variation of 43% in the financial year 23-24, and another 43% in the following year, 24-25. And then a scenario B was presented of a salary of 28% in the financial year 23-24, a 28% in 24-25, and another 28% in 25-26, which would result in a compounding impact of 109%. During the course of looking at our operational expenses and management of finances and the expenditure, and looking at the financial sustainability of the council, it is my recommendation that council definitely needs a rate variation in order to be financially sustainable into the future. The 43% has been shortlisted by me as the Chief Finance Officer to address that deficit into the future. It is a percentage that I believe will assist council. It will not fix all our problems. It will assist council in at least keeping its head above the waters and progressing into the future. Not only is council, and I've mentioned it in the report as well, should just increase the rates, but council also needs to look at the service level deliveries in consultation with the community and on what all services and the expectation of the community. And that is why this report, and I emphasize it again, it is not saying that we are doing an application for 43% over 2 years. This is not this report. This is not that meeting. This is purely that as a Chief Financial Officer, the current situation of council's finances, if we were to keep our head above waters, I'm proposing a 43% to take to the community for a further impact and a further consultation with the open community, and to come back with that feedback and then let the councillors decide what the final percentage is going to be. And then we do a draft application into the month of October and November. And even if once we've done that, and whatever the percentage might be, it will be the deciding body, the IPART, which will actually finalize that percentage, and they may or may not agree with us. They might dismiss it, they might make it a lesser number. So it is purely at a proposal stage, at this stage. I just wanted to be clear on that. This report is not saying that today we are doing an application for a 43% rate rise. Take that the report has been read. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Roy. And before I go to questions, I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that I just really want to thank our team of councillors and staff for all the work and effort we've got into the last 6 months. I know the report says that there have been several council workshops. There have been many council workshops and many, many more behind the scenes workshops with staff, and to find savings, efficiencies, cost cutting, some of which sadly has resulted in some severely reduced services in our roads. Staffing restrictions, we currently have, I think, 22 vacancies. And I have to say there that quite a few of those vacancies have resulted from people who have left due to the vicious attacks in the public arena on council staff. Remembering that these are people in our community with families who do not deserve to be referred to the way certain people have chosen to, and in the current jobs market have been able to find work elsewhere and not be subject to such disgusting behaviour anyway. As councillors, we put ourselves up at election, and you've got to be prepared to comment, but it's not fair on staff who are doing their best. This morning, the International Monetary Fund have said that warned that we're teetering on a global recession, conflict, inflation, they called it, due in great deal to the Ukraine war, because of what's happened with fuel. Fuel drives inflation more than anything else. And Australia this morning, 6.3% inflation and heading to at least 7% by the end of the year. So it's more than doubled since we first started talking about this earlier in the year. I'd also like to remind people that our road length, you can't compare our road length to other similar shires with the same road length because of our rainfall terrain steepness. It's not apples and apples. And also things such as farmland, comparing rates. You also have to remember arable land compared to Tenterfield, a country compared to irrigation, cropping, shires, etc., that have been plucked out. I'd also like to advise people that all Tenterfield motions that went to the National General Assembly of Councils were passed, including that our federal assistance grants be returned to 1.2% instead of diminished down to 0.55%, which would make a huge difference to our sustainability. And another one was removing the co-funding requirement for small rural councils. Also attended the Roads Congress to sort of ask for the state to take back the Bruxton and Mount Lindesay highways, which is about $900,000 a year in our depreciation, which is quite significant. And also that public land should be paying rates to decrease the burden on the other ratepayers of the Shire. So that's it from me. So questions, we have Peter, the two Peters, then Gianna, our councillor Nye, councillor Sawyer, councillor Tim, and so we'll start with Peter.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. And Roy, thank you for your report. It's detailed and the effort that you and your team continue to put into to keep us informed as councillors with this, what we're dealing with. Madam Mayor, my question's to do with page 205 and through you to CEO Kylie Wentworth. I have no problems as a councillor with the drop-in sessions. I'm referring to that. A couple of questions. Due to with the timings from Monday 8th of August to the Friday the 19th, and I'm noting whose community can meet, performance to meet with councillor, chief executive officer, corporate officer, the director of infrastructure, no issues. I notice Roy's not, I thought he would be one of the big gig men, and we need to make ourselves available for that fortnight as councillors, like each day. It's just a bit of a clarity question, Mr. CEO. Or Kyle, whoever. There you go.
So first and foremost, one of the conflicts we have internally, obviously, is that we've got a limited pool of, whilst they're very talented staff, we're right in the middle of our audit at this point in time. So that is taking precedence here on in as opposed to consultation from the finance team. They've done a stellar job reworking all of our numbers, and now it's more about the conversation. In terms of the community engagement, once again, that'll be, we've indicated that we've set aside that time, once again, also due to staffing issues at this point in time. And what we're actually happy to do is be led, I guess, a bit by the community and how they actually wish to receive us and the councillors. What I mean by that is if we are invited to progress meetings by the councillors, if there's a specific forum that people want to attend, if there is a one-on-one, we've already had over 2 hours with the Urbanville Progress Association representatives. So we're trying to make as much time available to target those specific questions that groups have, and they are varied depending on where we are within the Shire and people's general interests at this stage.
Through the mayor, if I just add to that, we did the session with the Urban Progress Association as a bit of a litmus test to see if that would work. And the challenge is what we're talking about is very, very complex. It's a very complex situation with moving targets. It's not even complicated. Complicated's easy. Complex, it's hard to pin down. So what we found was when we could sit down face-to-face, one-on-one, we can walk people through the financial structure, the stuff that we give councillors and all the rest of it, we can answer the questions specifically. And what we found was generally they actually got an understanding of the situation and why we're making the recommendations we're making. In a public forum, which we've already done, we don't get down to that detail. It tends to be a little bit emotional. So we think out of respect to the ratepayers that we're better off giving a personalised, and we can do it in small groups, which we did with the Urban Progress Association. And they had I think it was about, Councillor Bonner was there, it was about 4 pages of questions, I think, at the end of the day. And I think it worked out okay. So that's why we're going in this pathway, so we can personalise it. Now, having said that, we're happy to go out to some of the Regional Progress Association meetings. That was probably not well documented in the report that was saying just the council building. That's not the case.
Thank you. Yeah. And just to remind Madam Mayor, thanks for your reply, both Kylie and to you, Darryl. Yeah, but getting back to my questions as a councillor to do with that 2-week period. So we'll be notified that we're required, or say, or we just hop in the car with you and yeah, okay.
That's essentially it. So we're hoping that all of those councils, based on the feedback from their constituents, one, that you'll make yourselves available, or note that that is the consultation period, and that you'll be one of those linchpins between your community and constituents to actually advise us where we need to be going. That means we need a breakfast meeting at Mingoola and a nighttime meeting somewhere else. As I said, between Darryl, Fiona and I, we'll try and support you in having those conversations.
Well, thank you.
Sorry, just from the mayor, just qualify that, but what we're after is not going and having massive group meetings. What we're saying is we'll go out with you to the areas and we'll have appointments that might be whatever we decide is the right length, and that will adjust as we go along, and we'll receive groups of 2 or 3, maybe up to 4 at a time, maybe 5. We'll play it by ear, so we can give a really personalised service and give actually proper answers to questions rather than generalising, because I think there's a lot of confusion and there's a lot of, unfortunately, misinformation and fake information out in the community, and we think this is the best way of giving people value.
Like we'd be a delegation from that area.
Yes.
Mr. Senator. Right, thank you.
That's correct, Councillor.
Thank you.
And several, Councillor Petty, so say it was Urbanville or Laguna or Liston, instead of trying to do as we've done before, 3 in a day, if, depending on how many appointments were made, you'd probably spend longer at one place and have to maybe do another. So it's a bit of a suck it and see. Like, some of us are also concerned about, well, some people find that a better approach because they're afraid of speaking up in a public forum, and other people are less inclined because they feel a bit more intimidated, they've said, to coming in. Also, the concern is that how much council staff time this is going to take doing it this way. So it's a bit of a suck it and see thing, and it's not absolutely set in stone. We'd like to see how it works.
Madam Mayor, I've no problem with the concept. I think it's a really good one, and I'm just trying to make myself available when I'm needed. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First, a question to Roy, then one to Darryl. Roy, do I understand correctly that if IPART approved a certain percentage. Next May, when councillors vote on the actual rate increase for 2023, 2024, it could be less than what IPART had approved.
Yes, councillor, that's true.
Thank you. Now, a lot has been said about financial sustainability of council. Could you summarise the consequences of a rate increase not being sufficient to guarantee the future financial sustainability of council?
Yes, thank you, councillor, for the question. The fact is, what are our calculations now, our work behind the scenes, looking at, as you're quite aware, not several scenarios, multiple of scenarios and different ways of cutting the cake. We believe that the 43% over 2 years will give us some long-term sustainability, probably up to the 10-year mark, maybe a little bit longer. Our concern in the middle of that is the cash position. That's really where we're at risk. I think that will give us long-term sustainability, but we're still working out how we deal with the cash issue. Now, failing to get the 43%, as we've workshopped, at some point we do become unsustainable, and as we've done with the forward projections, as we've calculated, that comes up on us fairly quickly. So we could be really in a position where you would be under administration anything from 18 months to maybe 24 months. Roy might want to qualify that.
Yes, that's correct.
And so, unfortunately, all the scenarios, all the different ways of cutting this particular cloth, we have landed that is the only sustainable one going forward, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Thank you. We might just go around the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've looked at it fairly in depth and I can't see any way out of it. We've just got to increase the rates. Everything's gone up. Fuel, wages, food, everything's gone up. And I just can't see how we can be sustainable unless we increase our rates. If we go to administration, administrator will take over. The rates will still go up. You'll sell everything that we've got. We're at the end of the shire, the end of the state, so we'll get no services whatsoever. And in the last scenario, if we do get amalgamated with somebody, we'll get absolutely nothing at this top end of the state. So I think the ratepayers have got to look at that. Thank you.
Thanks, councillor Tom. Councillor Jill.
Just a few questions for you now. Are we being asked to see if this 43% permanent for 2 years will make us financially sustainable in the long term? And from what I've just heard, we've been told that it won't, because it all boils down to what IPART said. So if IPART comes back, having a look at all the demographics and everything that they have on hand, they say, no, you can only go with the 50%. We'll be not insolvent because we're a council, but we will be in administration not far down the track.
It would be, for instance, should I come back and say, no, we're going to give you whatever, let's say the 50%, as you've said, it would then be, we would have to reduce, cut our cloth to fit, reduce services considerably. As Councillor Tom said, if an administrator came in, not only would they immediately raise rates and not go to any community consultation, they, because remember we are quite low rated compared to other councils, they would also shut down or sell off certain things that are very dear to the community that we are trying to still keep open. And that's the difference between our approach and for instance, an administrator's approach. And Darryl will let.
Through the mayor, your point's quite valid, and that's part of the problem when we're trying to work out a go forward, is because we don't control the field of play. So all we can do is put up what we think, what the information, what the data tells us is the best way forward for the community. And then IPART will have to make a call. Now, I've been told through a contact this morning that there'll be somewhere between 30 and 40 councils putting an SRB in next year. So it's not just us. That tells us a number of things. It tells us that there's a lot of problem out there. And if IPART does decide to say, no, that's unacceptable, what they're in effect telling us is that we will look at your finances and we're willing to put you into insolvency. I'm not so sure they'll do that, but again, I don't know. Having said that, we are obligated as a council to put up the most sustainable for the organisation and the services we're currently delivering. We're obligated under the legislation to put up a proposal that does meet our sustainability responsibilities.
Okay, and that's fine because it's in this that we were given back in January. But at the last point of service levels and funding, it has stated, if considering the SRB, there's a typo error, must consider what the community can afford. And that's when I come back to the information that's for all of us on the council website that gives you the pyramids of our age. It gives us our weekly household income, which is quite shocking. So the question is, I as a councillor have to today pass an increase to people's rates over 2 years of 104%, and we will have reduced services. It's not that we're getting anything. We're going to still be in austerity and we will still have reduced services. And I have to, as a councillor, yes, take in the obligation for financial long-term stability, which this does not give us, and that I must understand, I must consider what the community can afford. At the moment, Madam Mayor and CEO, I cannot see anything that shows me our community can afford this rate rise.
Thanks, Councillor Secon. I refer people to page 208 and 209, which is the table that shows, and also I'd like to thank our staff, because on the new rates and charges notice, they've actually separated the rates component from the charges so that when people are looking at the personal impact of the proposal, it's quite clear what part of that account that is sent out refers to the rates. And that is the part, it's the top two lines that this would refer to. So for instance, under our current structure, the change to residential Tenterfield for next year, should this go ahead and be accepted by IPART, would be an extra $5.41 a week. And then for businesses, it'd be $12.71. The villages change a bit, and for farmland general, it will be an extra $13.33 a month. This is on averages, so obviously for some it'll be a lot higher. And then the following year, Tenterfield residential would be an increase $7.84 a week, farmland $19.04 a week, Tenterfield business $18.38 a week. So say in 2 years' time, the cumulative effect of that would be for Tenterfield residential, as an example, an increase of $13.25 a week with this 104.49%, and for farmland general would be a total of $32.38 a week extra if you're at that as an average. But obviously for some people it'll be a lot less, for some people would be a lot more, and for some people would be less. So I thank the staff too for putting that weekly thing in there so people have a better understanding of the impact for our consultation. And so the question is the community's capacity to pay an extra $13.25 a week in town or as a farm, $30.38. And we understand the cost with pensioners, farmers after, throughout bushfires, floods, etc. Many of them not having their stock back. And if we get foot and mouth, we can kiss it all goodbye, and our businesses in those times. But it's nice to see that our businesses are actually starting to pick up. So that's what people in the consultation will need to look at, should this be approved today, is look at their rates notice, look at this, and then revert them back to their capacity to pay that increased figure per week.
Yeah,
Thank you. And
sorry.
Darryl wanted to qualify something.
Sorry, councillor, just remove any confusion. We're not asking you today to vote on a 104 rate rise increase or a 40 or the 43 and 43% increase. We're not asking you to vote on that today. We're asking you to vote, that is the number we'll go to the community and have the consultation with. We're a long way away from you having to vote on adopting that percentage. That will happen probably around about November this year. That's what we'll vote to go to IPART with. That's the pointy end. Today, that's the number we want to go and talk to the community about so we can make sure that their information is disseminated correctly.
Okay, but seeing this figure is very similar to what we went out with a few months ago, and we know exactly what that resulted in, stress for many people. And as Royce said, this is only going to keep us with our head above water, I think. Okay, so all this information we have with us today, is it worth going out there? This is all I'm saying. Is it worth going out there, spending time and money for something that will probably get pushed back?
Push back on the basis that it's not enough, or push back on the basis that the community can't pay?
Push back because the community say, if I'm going to have to pay that $13 extra that you pointed out, they would expect services for that. Otherwise, you know, why stay in this town if we're not respecting them as a community and their views? What are we giving our community?
With the proposed special rate variation, it's restricted funds that are tied specifically to infrastructure, whether it be roads, buildings, swimming pool, cemeteries, etc. So just to clarify that as well. So the proposal for this is to ensure that the services to maintain those to an acceptable level continue. That's what it's about.
So you're stating that that's what it's about, what you've just said.
It's been made very clear to us that if we don't apply for special rate variation, then we cannot, into the future, after this coming 12 months, continue to maintain a lot of that infrastructure to the level it has been maintained to date, and in fact would deteriorate rapidly, particularly if you're referring to the road network, because already this next 12 months we made a decision in looking for cost cutting and efficiencies, etc., to greatly reduce our road maintenance. So Fiona's department has taken the greatest hit, and of course then that is our greatest complaint from the community. And remembering too that people in the outlying areas of the villages and farms, etc., need those roads, and so therefore have a higher cost than personally because of fuel and everything else and damage to vehicles and vehicle running than people who live within the township. That is their expectation, is to have roads that are safe and trafficable, etc., and as well as the buildings and the cemeteries. I mean, you know, we've got people obviously dying. We need to ensure that people have access into parts of the cemetery to bury their loved ones and visit them. So it was designed earlier in the year that this was the rate that would maintain our services to current levels. The issue, the unknown, is that with the inflationary increase and the supply restrictions and the cost increases, that we, as you are aware, made huge savings and cost cuttings. And the gut-wrenching part is that it's that all those savings where we could have gone back to the community with a lesser figure have now been eaten up with all these increased costs in the last few months. And that's the really demoralising part of the whole process. We don't know what happens, say, in 12 months' time with inflation, whether they stop killing each other in Ukraine, etc., and things are back to normal with supply chains, etc., etc. and the inflation, now the costs decrease, we don't know. But certainly I think there was no appetite within councillors to go for a higher percentage than this to the community because of those inflationary pressures. So the only alternative is if this was accepted and if IPART accepted it, and if meantime costs go up, that's what Roy meant by saying this may also result in reduced services, not because of the money being insufficient, but it could, except we don't know what's going to happen meantime with supply costs, et cetera, and inflation. So that's the unknown part of the figure.
Thank you.
Darryl, could I just clarify one thing? Whatever we propose to IPART for the SRB, we only vote on the actual increase in rates next May.
Yes, councillor, just because if IPART approves the proposal, you're not locked into that proposal. For instance, if the FARGS grant gets increased, for instance, we may not need to actually rate that increase. It may be a lot less. The problem is we're talking about unknowns. I can't do a fantasy budget going forward. I just want to qualify something for Councillor Secon as well. I understand her concern. So the options are, you're quite right, we can do nothing. At that point, an administrator will come in and you'll have no control, there'll be no consultation, and they'll just cut and burn until they get us back into the black. And that means no one will have any input or say until what services are reduced or how they're reduced, or you can control the mission. If you control the mission, at least then the community then has the opportunity to choose. And you're quite right, we still have to look at what services we can afford to offer, but at least the community can be involved in identifying those services. So I dare say, yes, road network is going to need to be looked at, but at least if we manage it as a council, then the community can have input into how we manage it and what that might look like. If you do nothing and you have an administrator, you don't have any say at all, and there's no one to write to. He'll just come in or she will come in and they'll just slash and burn and the community will have no say whatsoever. So I guess that's the decision that as councillors you need to make. What is the best outcome for the community, A or B? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Thanks, Gianna. Councillor John.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. As a hobby farmer, I can see my rates going up by at least $100 a week, which I'm not happy about, but I can't see how we cannot put this application in. Otherwise, as Darryl says, we'll have an administrator, instead of 10 of us sitting around here, there'll be one. And that person will make all the decisions. And like you said, the cutting and burning. My main concern here is the community consultation method we've been talking about. I personally think we should have public meetings, 2 for the town, 1 for each of the villages. And we're going to cop it, but we just got to bear it and try and put our point across. Otherwise, that other Isaki group, whatever they're called, they'll be saying they'll be using our proposed method of consultation as a cop-out. And it doesn't give every person the opportunity. If you have 2 public meetings, say in the town, 1 in the morning, perhaps 1 in the afternoon, like we did before, there is no excuse for people not to come if they don't want to. And doing it this way just gives them oxygen. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor McLeish. Councillor Jett.
Thank you, Mayor. Being in view of the newness of my tenure, this is more voicing my thinking process of the situation going through. I recognise this is a very emotive subject, and being a very emotive subject, a lot of historical data comes up. From what I've seen, the problem with historical data, apart from learning from your mistakes, is without having full knowledge of what happened at that particular time, it's very hard for people to draw any conclusions from that. I really, above all in the discussions, as a councillor, I perceive now from all the things that are said, one of my greatest requirements is, in the first instance, to ensure the sustainability of the council. and then your level of jobs go down from there. And that's not a very easy subject, especially in both our national and international environment, because I don't believe anyone can budget more than 1 to 3 years. And within the next 12 months, I think the whole nature of the world is going to change again. And it's going to be like that for quite a period of time. Bottom line, I have to believe the maths that's provided to me on the screen. And I know the level of different scenarios that we have gone through. And I thank Roy and Jessica and the finance team for an extremely detailed amount of work. And I have to believe that because that's what's presented to me. I fully recognise that anything under 43% will not help us. I also recognise that 43% is not the answer, but at least is the start whilst we look at all our processes and consider how we best implement the future going ahead. So the future going ahead is the most important issue to me, and I have to believe the maths that has been provided.
Thank you, Councillor Nye. Please ask Darryl to respond to Councillor McNish's issue about people who can't make it to an appointment in business hours.
Through the Mayor, look, I mean, I understand the importance of this process, and as I said, we're not going to bring on legal staff and staff we haven't got to become part of this solution. However, myself and Kylie and Fiona are quite willing to make ourselves available at any time, whether it's after hours, early morning, whatever, to give detailed responses and advice. I'm not so sure you're going to be able to do that in an emotional full village forum, but if council wants to do that, we can certainly look at that. But at the end of the day, again, I have an open door policy. Apart from the Ratepayers Association, no one's actually taken advantage and come in and asked us, you know, what the process is, why, how did we get here? And I've made it very clear, I'm happy to have my finance team, I'm happy to provide the same information we've given council, but apart from some of the confidential stuff around staff matters, I'm happy to provide that in a forum where I can sit down and explain what is complex and detailed analysis, so people can have an informed decision. Now, without the opportunity to do that in a public forum, I'm not sure anyone's going to get any real value out of it, apart from perhaps some emotional release, and I'm not sure that's helpful for anybody. But I can commit that myself and my management team of two, including plus myself, will be available at whatever hours, after hours, morning that we need to be, to make sure that people do get the detailed and respectful information that they deserve.
Thank you, Mr. C. And that community consultation is looking in August, so perhaps at the August meeting we can see how that has gone and see whether we need to revisit the consultation format at the August meeting. Now, Councillor Tim.
Thank you, Mayor. In response to the community consultation, I think the Urbanville group have already decided to jump the gun a little bit, and they've called me down there for a meeting tomorrow night. So we shall see. With the SRV, I mentioned earlier about the job vacancies. We need operators in the seats. That's the bottom line. To do the jobs, I understand that funds have got to come from somewhere, but it's the simple lack of efficiency to have machines sitting there that we own, that we're paying for, and not be operated. So I'm dead against that. With the fuel pricing, a small calculation I just made, as I noted on Facebook yesterday, last night, whatever, fuel down to $1.89 in Oakey, and a rough assumption made, even if that were to manifest itself for council, it may only be a $200,000 saving, which is substantial, but not going to solve our woes. So whether it's really going to affect our the increases that we're facing to a large enough degree to stop this rate rise, I have my doubts. To make the Shire financially sustainable, I'm really conscious that the ratepayers need to understand that we're doing everything we possibly can to not burden them alone. We've already taken quite a number of hits through staff efforts, which we have to applaud because it's not easy, and I totally understand where we're coming from. But the ratepayers themselves can't be the sole burden. Like if we're going to expect to get another 4.5 million or 5 million, it comes from ratepayers. It comes from people's pockets. And like I mentioned before in other meetings, that our family is going to go up another $10,000 a year, or more than $10,000 a year. And I don't know where that money is going to come from, apart from not employing our staff member, which is not good for anybody. Then my another point, Daryl fixed up earlier in one of his comments, that if the FAGS grant was to increase with some sort of miracle, that we'd love to see some sort of mechanism in place that ratepayers feel confident that they're not going to be charged the rates anyway to build up some sort of slush fund. I think, yeah, slush funds are good. You know, don't get me wrong, in long term, you know, in that you need to have a bit of space in your accounting to handle lumps and bumps. But in the next few years, I don't think we can simply afford to. We need to keep our ratepayers at the lowest possible cost. And I hope most ratepayers, and I understand that there is 1,463 farmland assessments in our shire, and that's 48, nearly 50% of our rate base. So all this impact is going to impact our major economy in our shire. And whereas cattle are reasonably financially sustainable at the moment, we all have spoken earlier about foot and mouth, and you put the rates up as suggested, which I think we're heading that way regardless, but making the point that farmers can't continue to carry this burden. If something happens, we can right at this point in time, but things can change very quickly. That's me, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peter?
No.
And yours, Councillor Kidd? Great.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. As Councillor Peter said earlier in another discussion, it's at the end of the top end of the state. There's no services available. I'm at the end of the table and there's not much meat left on the bone. But anyway, we shall persevere. I'm not actually asking a question. I'm just going to put my opinion across. The proposed issue going out to the public for their input under the process is the minimum, as has been pointed out already, to keep Tenterfield Shire Council sustainable moving into the future, for the immediate future anyway. We do have to offset that against the affordability of ratepayers to be able to meet that commitment. I can assure the ratepayers in the room and the ones that will watch it on tape and read about it, in this 6 months of this council term, we have spent more time in workshops than I spent in my previous 5 years on council. Those workshops were not wasted time. With the support of our dedicated staff, they gave us all the scenarios we asked for. So we haven't turned up here today with a recommendation to move forward based on a dart throw at the wall of a figure. This figure has been drilled down, pushed up, every possible scenario, Roy and your team, and I would like you to take forward all of our comments back to your team. Our thank you that we're not going into this blindly. We're going in armed with all the information that we do need to make this decision. As the CEO's pointed out, we are not being asked to vote on the rate increase today. We're being asked to provide a figure for the public to have a look at, weigh it up and say, okay, it's a hit, but it still gives us a council moving forward. If they do not accept it, and IPART more importantly doesn't accept it at the end of the day, as sure as the sun will come up in the morning, Tenterfield Shire Council will cease to exist if we do not get at least a 43% increase in the rates. As hard as that will be for all of us, I'm a ratepayer as well, and I'm on a fixed income, so my budget will be reassessed, no matter what figure we come up with. But at the end of the day, they're personal decisions. collectively as a council today, we have to make a decision moving forward to the public with the opportunity to come back to us, as a few of them, councillors have spoken. I also do not accept the fact that we are not going to hold any scheduled public sessions. I understand that people have the ability to make appointments and come and see different officers and get their own personal questions answered. I'm very happy with that. But at the other scenario, Councillor McNish raised it, it can be used as a cop-out that we aren't prepared to face the public. I'm prepared to face the public. I face them every day. I'm more than happy to do so. In order to control the dialogue on the day, I suggest that when we put the dates out for 2 public sessions in town, one in the morning, one in the afternoon or evening, that anybody who has any questions must submit them 7 days prior so that council's officers have got the opportunity to look at the question, get the required information for those individuals, rather than hand a microphone around the room so that the usual ones that can get up there and dominate the discussion for 40% of the time or more and leave no time for the others that are very interested in how their personal circumstances are affected. So that's my suggestion as part of the consultation process, that we do schedule 2 sessions in Tenterfield Township itself, with the requirement that anybody who wants a question answered must submit it 7 days before so that we can get accurate information for them on the day, rather than have to swing off the seat of our pants with an answer that might not be 100% right. It'll be well-intentioned, but communication will help us get this across the line. If we pretend that there's no issue, we'll be in the ostrich theory. My opinion is we've done as much as we can to date. It's now back in the hands of the community after our vote today on IPART, and hopefully we'll get a right decision for everybody all around. Thank you.
Thanks, councillor Swire. I think, there you can see the majority of the councillors are happy to do, but certainly well prepared to do public sessions. And we know we don't have the staff to do the roundtable thing like we've done before. So whether we have time to do that in August, or whether that would have to be scheduled for September after these others or not, but that's something, the public consultation part of it we can revisit, or do you want that as part of the decision making today?
Through you, Madam Mayor, more than happy to take on board that commentary, which is what we've said all the way through, that we will try and respond as those needs emerge in the best way that we can. More than happy to organise those 2 sessions. Once again, just notwithstanding that, then it'll be Darryl, Fiona and myself and the councillors that need to go to that because we just don't have the resource in the
That's understood. And if it did have to be in September, that's still, early September, that's still quite fine, because we've got the other process happening. And Darren and I also have to go to the rock meetings, etc. So,
Madam, can I have a question? Since most of the questions from the community would relate to financial matters, why would Roy not be present?
because we'll hopefully have those questions beforehand, of which the staff can make those or certainly provide some feedback. But as I said, it will be right in the middle of our audit process. So we're just trying to resource those 2 things at this particular point in time. And I guess we've taken up a lot of Roy's time now to do the projections. So a lot of those questions will be based on the projections that have already been put forward.
Understand, but by September, won't the audit process be finished?
Yeah, there will be other jobs that we need to do. And don't get me wrong, this is not, I suppose it's setting the expectations. I've got no problem if Roy actually chooses to attend, but I won't be requiring Roy or the finance staff, based on, once again, the costings as well as their work, to actually undertake that part of the consultation. We'll try and manage it within our existing work hours where we possibly can.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. No further comment? So just in finishing, I remind people that with that background data, that IPART did note that there had been a foreshadowed special rate variation for the Shire in 2018, 2019, which obviously never happened. So we're 4 years down the track on that one. as I said, we will obviously, there's a very much an appetite from councillors, myself included, to have public sessions as well as the interviews. As all the councillors have said, we have been working zealously and the staff in trying to look at all options. And just councillor, sorry, if IPART doesn't agree to whatever percentage we go to them with, I don't think the Shire would cease to exist, but it would exist in a different form with far more restricted services available to the ratepayers and the residents. So I'll now put the motion. All in favour? Against?
And I'd like a division, if there's
Have you
someone.
moved, someone second for a division? Councillor Rhodes. So just to make it clear, we just voted that this is what we will go to the community with. This is not what we're recommending to IPART. So yes, is Councillor Secon, Paul, Councillor Murphy, Councillor Peters, Councillor Nish, Councillor Nye, Councillor Petrie. Just back up a little bit. There we go. Yeah, Councillor Bonner. Councillor Sawyer. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and we'll prepare the information to go to page 211. Thank you very much, Roy. Now, Roy, you up for this one as well? Yes. Item GRB 62/22. Acceptance of a qualified opinion from the Audit Office of New South Wales for financial statements 30th of June 2022. Regarding the treatment of rural fire service assets. Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Sawyer, seconded by Councillor Kim. Moved by Councillor Sawyer, seconded by Councillor Rhodes. Thank you, Board.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report is to inform Council regarding the implied intention of Audit Office of New South Wales to issue qualified audit opinions to Tenterfield Shire Council if rural fire service assets are not incorporated in the Council's financial statements. Bit of a background. The Audit Office of New South Wales provided Council with a final management letter for the final phase of the audit 2021 in February 2022. The letter provides information on matters of governance, interest as a result of conducting the audit, unresolved matters from previous audits, and matters the auditors is required to communicate as per the Australian auditing standards. In their letter to Council, 1 low risk and 2 high risk assessments were mentioned, one of which were rural fire service firefighting equipment not recognized in the financial statements. Rather than providing a too technical conversation, in essence, in layman's terms, what the New South Wales Audit Office wants is that all RFS assets, including the red fleet, the trucks, to be put into Council's books and be treated as Council's assets. There are currently 68 councils across New South Wales which are against this proposal by the New South Wales Audit Office. There's a number of conversations happening at a higher level, at ministerial levels, to make the New South Wales Audit understand that this pushing of cost shifting towards local council under the cover of control is actually false. Council does not actually control any RFS assets. That's a view that has been taken by a number of councils, especially within the New England region as well. The implications that this report is focusing on and what the word qualified for the members who don't are not in the auditing terms basically means that the audit office is saying that council is misrepresenting its financial statements. That's what the word qualified means in Australian auditing standards. So We have written a number of correspondence to the Office of Local Government, to our auditors, seeking clarifications, seeking technical expertise. And we have not received a response, a proper response to that effect, as to why council should state that it controls RFS assets. And this report basically informs the council that in the report to the Parliament by the New South Wales Audit Office, it was mentioned that if those councils not choosing to incorporate RFS assets may get a qualification as a financial in their audit of the financial statements. And we are accepting that qualification because there are 68 other councils who are in the same boat as us. There are councils which are jumping the ship purely because, if I may use the word, the bullying tactics used by the New South Wales Audit Office, saying that you will have issues in your grant funding, you won't get any loans. Our council, those loans that they're talking about are TCOP loans, where the TCOP institution does require your financial statements to be given to them, and having a qualification to the bad audit does create an issue. However, our council does not deal with TCOP. We don't have the issue of dealing with the TCOP corporation to get any loans. We go to the open market. But it is more of a matter of technical justification that has been unable to be provided by the New South Wales audit as to why fire service assets should be put into our books. The whole activity has taken our staff a number of weeks, months, regular consultation with the RFS at a time when RFS assets were distributed towards the Lismore floods. And that's one of the things that a number of bodies who support our claim say, that no one from the RFS called council and asked, can we send this red truck to Lismore? Council does not have control of where the red trucks go, or any equipment for that matter. So it is a technically flawed application that is being put by the New South Wales Audit Office under the cover of control. And also ethically, I believe that it is a wrong process of cost shifting by the state government to local government. We have done a very quick assessment of the implications of this. And if we were forced, and I'll emphasize the word forced, to incorporate RFS assets, you're looking at an additional depreciation expense of approximately $345,000, hitting our already financially struggling and sustainable organization. So by no means we should listen to the New South Wales Audit Office until there is an accounting standard or an auditing standard or a technical paper that they can say this is the reason why you should be putting RFS assets onto your books. So this report is just accepting that if we do get a qualification based on the RFS assets, that's what the reason would be.
Thank you very much. Roy, just for those who may not have read the lengthy report, we recently met with the President and the CEO of Local Government New South Wales, and had just prior to that received a letter from the President of Local Government New South Wales, Dario Turley, and I'll just read a couple of salient points. One is that councils have no say in the acquisition of the assets, no involvement in their deployment, and none in their disposal. So, as Roy said, under no accounting standard does that mean that council has control. Also in the Act, just because it says so in the Act, it also says we are supposed to be notified before any equipment leaves the Shire, which obviously doesn't happen because they're a standalone entity. Also, Dario continued, the latest development only compounds the past, given the government's 7th of June letter included in the report, which states neither it nor the local government minister have legal authority to direct councils to record the assets and assume the costs. She has urged the government to finally clear up this mess once and for all by ensuring the New South Wales government acknowledges rural firefighting equipment is controlled by and the property of the RFS, I'm appealing to you to join your fellow councils in rejecting this shameless financial chicanery, help restore financial transparency and integrity to the process by moving motions advising the audit office your council will not carry out the stock takes and will not record RFS assets on your financial statements. And this action is supported by resolutions passed at several local government New South Wales conferences and meetings of the Country Mayors Association. So that's the point of the recommendation. But I would just ask if in 4 whether we should have the words "should such be forthcoming," because we haven't received a qualified opinion, but it potentially could happen. And I just advise there are 68, at least 68 councils and potentially more. So more than half the councils in the state feel very strongly about this. And because SES, police, the fire and emergency, all are standalone organisations, all work exactly the same as RFS, and they all are responsible for their own depreciation. Thank you, Roy. So any questions?
Sorry, I was just going to say, more than happy if you want to actually put that in there, we'll accept that as an officer's amendment. The council adopts an acceptance of a court should be issued from the Audit Office of New South Wales in relation to the Rural Finance Service, Rural Fire Service assets. Unfortunately, once again, the ongoing rhetoric, I guess, in that arena is that it's becoming more likely by the day that they will become more and more insistent. So it's the likelihood's increasing.
Thank you. So this is not a political stance. This is a stance relating to accounting standards and also to the financial sustainability of the small rural shires. And because it's quite a potentially significant impost when we actually have no control whatsoever. So no questions, all in favour? Sorry, Tim.
Just like to clarify, if you don't mind, I mentioned this at previous meetings as a deputy captain of our local brigade, whether I should abstain from the vote. Yeah, obviously there's no financial benefits, there's nothing coming my way, but I do hold the executive position in our brigade.
I think the nature of this issue and the particular level, and it's only my opinion, as I said, you are personally responsible for your conflicts of interest register, but I would think that it's a long way removed from that particular position to the resolution that council's been asked to consider today.
Thank you. And I should also add that when Darryl and I went to a Board of Regional Councils meeting, the Northern Tablelands member had stated that he had spoken at length with the Commissioner of the RFS, and he said they're aware that they should be responsible, but it's a government directive, and he's very strongly urged us to stand firm on this issue because of the accounting standards. It's just no control whatsoever. So all in favour?
Sorry, one question. I just draw, it's just an explanation on page 384 of attachment 5. Just an explanation of what under the Council of what they paid up.
Through you, Madam Mayor, they were the items of significance raised in last year's audit. So that's the report from the Audit Office, and that related to the issues that we had with our unrestricted cash, of which that loan and obviously subsequent conversations have been around the council. Yeah, that's correct. So we had a statement of matter in our statements that related to our restricted cash at that point.
Okay, one and third. Okay, all in favour? Carried unanimously. We know it was carried unanimously. And if we can advise the Office of Local Government. Not the Office, sorry, Local Government New South Wales. Thank you very much, councillors. We move to page 390. Item GOB 63/22, policy 2.162, public gates and vehicle bypasses. A mover and second.
Madam Mayor, happy to move. Would it be appropriate to do the two together? Page 390. They're similar. They're similar items, Madam Mayor.
Yes, so just.
So basically do item GOB 63/22 and 64/22 together.
All in favour to do them. This is about putting these policies on public. Any submission? Thank you. So item GOB 64/22 is the policy 2.130, construction and maintenance of property access from council roads. So mover and seconder, please.
I'm happy to move again.
Thank you. And councillor Peter Murphy, to councillor Peter. Peter Petty, maybe the second. And welcome back, Dave.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And yeah, I agree with the councillors. The two matters are very similar. These are existing council policies. There's no change at this stage. There's no expressed desire to change them. But the opportunity arises, we will be reviewing them in 2 months' time. I just see it as an opportunity to give the public the opportunity to make comment. There may be some comments towards improvements in the process or improvements in the detail. And even in the process in how the staff deal with the matters. The public gates or cattle grids as they are, we will be over coming months as resources allow, we will be inspecting the network. There's over 500 out there, but there are a range of conditions out there and the standards. There's some that certainly need some improvement, but there's many where people have actually gone to a great lengths to upgrade their cattle grids. Similarly with the driveways, driveway accesses are quite variable. Some of them take quite a lot of staff time and detail to go through. But then some people are quite, have quite simple matters. So we're looking to, if there's an opportunity to explore to streamline the process or the detail, it's an opportunity prior to us actually reviewing them to seek some community input. So we're just purely seeking to put the existing policies out there on public display for 28 days. Just to get some input if there's any out there from anybody, suppliers, contractors, landowners, and we can take that on board during our review process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dave, did you have a question? So is that something we should also advise in our newsletter to tell people there will be a bit of an inspection so that people can make sure they're all up to standard? Thank you. All in favour? Carried. Now move to page 3. Thanks, Dave. Page 398, item GOB 66/22, updated citizen and customer contact charter to customer service charter. A mover and seconder, please.
394.
Oh, it's yours. Looking a bit like a hedgehog here and I'm sticking those.
394.
Yeah, 394. 398. Yeah, sorry, item GOB 65/22. Which is the Murray Darling Association. Yeah, sorry, I skipped that. Item GOB 65/22, executive positions, Murray Darling Association, move and seconder. So with councillor Murphy, councillor McNish. Thank you, Lynn.
So
Or are you doing?
Lib or I can do this one. So obviously the purpose of this report is to seek council endorsement for council delegates on the Murray Darling Association and for nominations to the position of chair or as executive committee. So there's an officer's recommendation there that the council endorses the nomination of councillor delegate councillor Greg Sawyer for the position of chair or executive committee member of the Murray Darling Association Region 11, and notes that nominations need to be lodged with the returning officer on the appropriate nomination form by 12 p.m. on Friday, the 29th of July 2022, for determination of the general meeting to be held the 12th of August at the Gunnedah Shire Council. So we've got to move on.
Councillor Murphy moved and councillor McNish seconded. Now, any questions?
I just want to firstly commend him on his longevity with the Murray Darling and to declare the money he gets paid to go in this group.
I will say that it is only executive committee member. I am not standing for the chair because that means we've got to do the secretarial work as well. And I know we're under-resourced and can't do it. I've already told Jamie Chappie I'll nominate him and that's been done.
Thank you very much for that, councillor Sawyer. So all in favour? Against? Carried. So now we'll go to page 398, item GOV 66. Slash 22, the updated citizen and customer contact charter to customer service charter. Thank you. I'll move and second that. Yep. Councillor Gianna and Councillor Rickish. Michael moved. Councillor Rickish.
Good morning. The purpose of this report is to update Council's citizen and customer contact charter to reflect Council's current customer services. The Citizen and Customer Contact Charter has been redrafted as the Customer Service Charter 2022 to reflect the intent of Council's strategic framework for customer service. Detailed procedural information has already been adapted from the Citizen and Customer Contact Charter to customer service procedures, which are already in use for council employees.
Thank you. So the recommendation is to place the charter on exhibition, and if no submissions are received, then it will stand. It will be adopted. Any questions? If all in favour? Carried. Now we have item page 42, the report. Recommendation that the reports and recommendations from the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee meeting down to June 2022 be received. Move and second.
Happy to move with a question if I may, Madam Mayor.
Certainly, Councillor Kennedy. Seconder. Councillor Sawyer. Yes. Go ahead.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. And just purely, because I'm a bit of an inquisitive fellow, but I see in the minutes of the Audit and Risk and Improvement Committee, the attendance, and I think I know the answer anyway, so are you not a voting delegate? You can't vote, Madam Mayor, so it's only the appointed two being Peter and Tony. And the only thing, and this is not a personal thing, because I know he's been there from something, but as Andrew Page, has he been active in this? He seems to be apologies a fair bit. And once again, I say that with respect, nothing in Andrew.
You know, we have received a few apologies from Andrew at this point in time, but he has been active at certain times. So as I said, he still remains a member of that committee, as do I remain a member of the Southern Downs Audit and Risk.
So that was my next question. So you still do that gig?
That is
Probably, thank you. So that's very important.
But the impulse, not just so that we are aware that you know, Andrew is participatory, but our workloads are a little bit lighter than the workload of Southern Downs for those particular committees.
Thank you, Madam.
So I'm an observer.
Yeah. I thought there was a case. I just read whether they're all moving and second all the way down. I'm thinking, oh. So.
Whilst we're going back and forth, we are fully compliant with the draft requirements put out by the LG, despite the fact that they continue, I guess, to revise some of those guidelines. So that's why we shifted our charter previously. So we are actually in compliance with the guidelines as they were put forward, even though they're not finally adopted.
Thank you. So all in favour? Carried. Page 407. Item RC 12/22. This is the report from Councillor Kim and Tim, the Kim team, regarding their attendance at the 2022 Destination and Visitor Economy Conference in Orange. Be received and noted. Now, a mover and seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Sawyer.
Kim should move around.
You move your own report. And seconded by Councillor White. I did see them working collaboratively with Councillor Petty to finalise the report. Thanks, Tim. Did you, Tim, wish to make some comments?
I just like it.
Sorry, my only comments are probably well written in here, but for myself personally and Councillor Bonner, I know that we both found the experience of going to that conference very, very helpful to our new roles as councillors with Tenfield Shire Council. And yes, we were able to speak and liaise with many, many people from many different councils right around New South Wales. And there was some also there from Victoria. So thank you.
That's right, Councillor Tim, if you'd like to add something about the electric vehicle and the grants available, because you're quite involved in that.
That's right. Mayor, I attended the, what they call the stream of the electric vehicles, committed the whole day to that through electrical vehicle charging stations and the advice from a consultant about the effectiveness of the new range of electric vehicles coming onto the market and where we sit and all that. But the thing to draw back from that was the potential for any business, and if it's not on the list, I'll put it on, that any vehicle, any business can apply to have a fully funded vehicle charging station in New South Wales, predominantly aimed at tourism operators, pubs, clubs, that sort of thing. But that's really no headache. There is a little bit of paperwork to do with it. I've started it for ourselves, and it's quite onerous, but obviously most grants are. So I think it's definitely worthwhile for every business in this shire to potentially make this shire a green or an EV destination, and it will help our tourism no end. So getting into the outer lying areas around the shire, especially in the north, which of course is the best part of the shire, obviously. But Drake, I guess even Mingoola would be a good spot too, because if vehicles are struggling, they can always get to somewhere that they can get a bit of charge in, and it'll give them more confidence to come into our shire. So I encourage people to look at that. I do have the details somewhere in my portfolio if people want to look into that, so I can forward those details on to someone.
That would be something we could add to our local news, and Councillor Murphy previously has raised the opportunity for us here, not just vehicles, but also for e-bikes to have charging stations, say at the dam, somewhere in town, and they could be hired. And talking about own source income, it was something Councillor Rhodes had also raised, that council could at the business centre hire electric bikes to encourage people touring around town, etc., and also potentially make some funds.
There is an EV toolkit on the website that will provide any applicants with information towards whether they are fit for it or not. So there is a quick EV toolkit.
Thank you. Is this something you'd like to add to a future workshop for council potential involved?
Absolutely, there'd be no problem at all.
Thank you.
Madam,
Any questions?
yes.
Yes.
More of a comment, Madam Mayor. I wish to, the council wish to commend both councillors for the detailed report which they've provided us. I think it's great. A newly elected councillor going to such things is a great experience for them. Too many times, with respect, some delegates go away, this council will come back with a more brief report than that, so I do commend them. And without stirring the possum, Madam Mayor, it's about time, I know it's been talked about loosely, especially with the refurb of Memorial, that we start looking in the hole in some of these conferences. You know, we offer a lot in this shire, and I don't think it's too out of the way. And I know the closest is Ballina or Toowoomba or Armadale as far as people flying here. I've been to conferences, Madam Mayor, proudly as mayor, and plane, train, car, and rode a horse the last 5 days to get there. So don't tell me it's too far out of the way, and I just wanted to drop that one into that.
Not at all. And as Councillor Secon raised some months ago, the opportunity to apply to have conferences here. And with the time frame, I believe Gillian did prepare an application to hold a water conference here next year. I think it's for next year.
Yeah.
Because that was the one that was seen to be easiest to do in the time frame. And thanks to Councillor Secon for reminding us of that opportunity. Councillor Brett.
So we agree again, yeah, that's fine.
No, we're under a
Thanks,
strange.
Madam Mayor. Support Councillor Petty. Kim and Tim have set the bar very high for post-conference reports. So we'll be doing our best. And just as a point of notice or interest on the electric vehicles, I don't know whether it was Australia's first semi-trailer or Australia's largest electric semi-trailer caught fire, and the Tuggerah Lakes Fire Brigade had to put out what was left of it.
Yes, and the other thing about the trucks, at the Rose Congress, the representative from the Transport industry, he did warn that for some trucks, it'll be an extra 10 tonne in weight because of batteries. He said, sorry about our roads. But when we went to the Canberra conference, we looked at a smaller, obviously much smaller truck, and the batteries were quite small. It was really quite.
Solar panels on the roof are the problem.
But there is clearly an opportunity here with our proximity to Brisbane, the Gold Coast, North New South Wales, to increase our through either private enterprise or whether we can with council have additional charging stations and also for the e-bikes as well.
Just adding to that just quickly, there is an accepted range, they say, for EV tourism, which is the good vehicles have a range of 450 kilometres. So as long as you're within that 350 to 450 range, you can attract EV tourism.
Well, Tesla was supposed to put a bank of 6 here, supercharge, because we were the sweet spot between Tamworth and Toowoomba. And it was supposed to happen early this year. I don't know what's happened with any progress on that. Councillor Chair?
Yes, seeing we're on the point of going green, wouldn't this be a good point to have a waste audit in council? And that way we can show we're actually working towards it, because we have, in my opinion, 148 pages of this massive here that's printed in colour. It comes at a cost. It comes at a cost in time, and it could easily be resolved by putting a link into the page that's available and we can access it. I think it's about time Tenterfield Shire Council does its own waste audit to see where we're going, because if we want to be considered for something like this, we also have to show that we are proactive.
Point of order, Mrs. Mayor, we're talking about the tourism report.
That's right. It's a little bit of a tangent, but Councillor Secon, I'm sure that if we get an appropriate SRB, we'll have the staff to be able to conduct such an audit. Thank you. Councillor McNich.
Thanks, and then endorse other comments about the quality of your report, Tim and Kim, whoever did it. Well done.
Is it now?
No, not whatsoever. No, very comprehensive, very easy to read, and I enjoyed reading it. I just like all that we've done for the last X number of years is encourage all councillors to go to conferences if it's within your area. You can learn so much just by talking to other councillors and other staff. And as you mentioned, the historic murals, I think that's something we can look at in Tenterfield here. The Mayor and I, we've spoken about the possibility of getting something done on the front of that awful Telstra building next to the post office. Also that lane over here next to, or what's now the chemist shop. There's just all open for murals as well, and plus there are other places. So it's something we can look into. And it are very, very attractive things when you go into a town. They can just transform an otherwise very, very bland wall into something educational and meaningful. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Bruce. Councillor Murphy.
I also compliment Kim and Tim on the report. And I must say, in terms of tourist attractions, the idea of Tenterfield having its own volunteer town crier sounds good to me.
We did have all the list of those. Any further questions or comments? Thank you. All in favour? It's lucky, Lawrence. Page 411, item RES 7/20. Is it? Oh, sorry, yes, no, but in this one, sorry. Yeah, item RES 7/22, council resolution register, June 22, move and second, please. Councillor Peter and Councillor Peter. Now, it's notice the status. Does anyone have any questions relating to the content of the resolution register? Happy, all in favour to receive and note? Thank you. I'll now ask for a mover to suspend standing order, please. Councillor Sawyer, second by Councillor Nye. and we'll leave it confidential. And thank you, people in the Southern Valley, for your attendance, and we'll see you again.
Item COM 10/22, application for a license to install equipment on the Tenterfield Digital Tower erected on lot 5, DP 10073889. Officer's recommendation has been carried that council, 1, delegates authority to the chief executive to enter into a heads of terms, HOTs, to be prepared by council's appointed legal advisors and subject to the terms summarised in attachment A. 2, delegates authority to the chief executive to enter into new license to be prepared by council's appointed legal advisors and subject to the terms included in the heads of terms. And 3, authorises the license be signed under seal of council by the mayor and the chief executive. Thank you. I'll just declare the meeting is now closed. Thank you everyone for coming and for your input and your dedication. Lunch is available.